There are so many amazing and dynamic characters in the world of One Piece that it's sometimes hard to remember that a lot of these captains have crews backing them, and that these crew members are essential to not only their journey, but who the captains are as characters. Luffy would never have made it this far without every single member of his crew, and that's a fact, and that goes for every other pirate captain in the series. It's no wonder that the Pirate King, Gol D. Rogers' crew was so massive because he traveled all over the entire world in search for every single island. Sure, we know Roger, Rayleigh, Scopper, Crocus, but have you ever seen this guy before? This is JacksonBanner. I have searched and scoured every single chapter the Roger Pirates are a part of, and he's only shown up in one chapter in one panel. So when I tell you that everything surrounding this character heavily foreshadows JoyBoy,
stop the cap.
I know you're not going to believe me, but just hear me out real quick. JB is both important and literally halfway through both the names. JacksonBanner has a whitish blonde curly hairstyle similar to an afro that covers up his eyeballs. And Luffy's hairstyle is obviously white and curly as well, just like many things in his Gear 5th form. Both of them seem to have smoke surrounding them, with Luffy having a smoke ring and JacksonBanner being the only member of Roger's crew to have smoke in the background of his panel. And most obviously both the characters are laughing in these forms, but let's look away from that for now and go back to the individuality of him having his own panel. JacksonBanner is strangely isolated from the rest of Roger's crew, and usually these panels that are very small are used for transitioning from one scene to another. However, Roger is continuing his same speech right after, so it made me very confused as to why this would be important. That's until I saw that Roger was referring to JoyBoy in the panel right after. Is it possible that JacksonBanner being isolated and put into a small panel was intentional, sort of a magnifying glass to look at this specific panel before continuing on to what Roger was saying? And unlike every other page in this flashback, the borders of this page are gray instead of black, alluding to this page being more important to see the small details than every other one. So why am I being so hyper analytical for one panel of one page with one character who has no dialogue and only laughs, and that's it? That's his only appearance in the entire series. This dude has to be just nothing, right? Well, no. This dude is the reason why Roger found the One Piece, and here's why. I decided to make a sub goal, 10,000 subs and I get a One Piece tattoo. If you're interested, subscribe, let's get into this. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. This is by far the most ludicrous thing you've ever said. This is more of an L than the Sarazawa video. And first off, no, it's not. Let me explain to you why I think this is the case in two simple words. Crew dynamics. Let's look at Luffy's crew in comparison to Blackbeard's crew. Now, we already know a lot about the Straw Hats, so I'm not going to draw too long on this topic, but essentially, Luffy's crew isn't just a crew. They are a family. Luffy and the Straw Hats are ready to ride or die for every single member of their crew. It's already happened multiple times in the story with Robin and Sanji, and even in scenarios where the crew doesn't get along with one another, like with Usopp in Water 7 and Sanji on Whole Cake, you can clearly tell that they care about each other no matter what and are willing to do anything. And even if the crew does bicker every now and again, like Zoro and Sanji constantly fighting with one another, they know when things get serious, they're willing to put all of it to the side to make sure that they care about Luffy, their goal, and making him Pirate King. The crew is also able to make fun of each other, joke around, and just have a good time because they know that none of it really matters. And even though Luffy is a bit crazy every now and again and drives them to the scary place or the dangerous place rather than going the safe route, they know they can trust in him because they think of him as a friend and someone they genuinely respect. And we can see that this same dynamic is present in Roger's crew, where everyone respects Roger. They do go on a lot of fun adventures, they love to party, make fun of each other, and have a dream to go find the final island. Although we all know him as the Pirate King, and clearly he can definitely hold a bone to anyone in the entire world, Roger didn't even have a boat, so he needed Rayleigh. And then he needed so many other people on his journey, as we can tell throughout all of Oden's flashback. So the dynamic between Luffy and Roger's crew is similar, which is perfect because all the Roger pirates find similarities to Roger in Luffy. So I wouldn't be shocked if Luffy finds the One Piece in a very similar way to how Roger did. But now let's compare Luffy to Blackbeard. The first time we're actually introduced to Blackbeard's crew, we see their agendas plain and simple. They're only in it for the prize and not for the journey. And this is never seen more evidently then at Marineford when Blackbeard is taking Whitebeard's fruit, when Shiryu says straight up, "If it fails, are we splitting up?" Clearly, none of the Blackbeard pirates have any investment in one another, and only are caring about the prize at the end of the journey, the One Piece. None of them have any investment in personal growth for one another, any investment in actually caring about one another. They're all in it for one single goal, which is incredibly similar to what Rock's was in the past. And I personally believe that the fate of the Blackbeard pirates will be incredibly similar to the fate of the Rock's pirates, where both the crews don't really want to talk about their time involved with one another. And I believe that this fall off of the Blackbeard pirates will happen at the moment that they reach Laugh Tale, and they all start to betray one another in an effort to get the One Piece. However, their idea of what the One Piece isn't actually going to be the One Piece at all. The Blackbeard pirates are very superficial, vain, and immature. If someone on Blackbeard's crew tried to teasingly make fun of another member, I assume they would be dead within literally less than a few minutes. They'll see Roger's treasure that he left on Laugh Tale and assume that's the One Piece, when the real One Piece is something minor and insignificant, similar to the story of the Holy Grail, where there were many, many golden lavish cups surrounding the Holy Grail, but the real Holy Grail was pretty insignificant looking in comparison, because it's the meaning of the object, not the object itself, that's important. It's also possible that the scenario could play out like this. They get to Laugh Tale and there's absolutely nothing on the island, causing them to completely come into a frenzy, start attacking one another, and realizing that Roger played them, when in fact the One Piece is actually there, they just didn't realize it. This is very similar to the chapter with Gaimon all the way at the beginning of the story, where you discover that the real treasure isn't the treasure you've been searching for, but what's on the island already. Luckily, we know that the One Piece is actually an item that Roger saw and laughed at. So this had me thinking, what's something that both Luffy and Roger might experience that Blackbeard might not? And this made me think about the way that their crews interact with one another, and that led me to one final solution. The way that I think Luffy and Roger found the One Piece, but Blackbeard won't. And that's by having friends. And I know that might sound kinda corny. That makes it seem like the One Piece is the friends they made along the way, and in essence, it is. However, this outcome allows the One Piece to be something a lot grander than just some meaningful message, and being a physical object in this world, only achieved by the friends that they made along the way, which I think is a really great way of going about it. But then, what do I think the One Piece actually is? I personally think it's going to be an insignificant object that was only able to be found by Luffy and Roger, and I think that Blackbeard won't be able to find it because of his lack of friends. So I have ideas of what the One Piece could be found with, however I don't have an idea of what the One Piece could be. That is until I saw Dax Sake's Lafro Tale video. The One Piece is an afro might sound absolutely insane and completely ridiculous, but he gives a lot of great evidence as to why this would be the case, and I definitely think this is a possibility for what the One Piece is going to be. And this sort of cemented a new idea into place. And yes, it all comes down to JacksonBanner. JacksonBanner has a whitish blonde curly hairstyle, similar to an afro. Hopefully you didn't forget about him. But what are the afro connections between Roger and Luffy's crew? Luffy has Brook, who is an afro as a major part of not only his backstory, but his character design, and we have JacksonBanner, who coincidentally just so happens to have an afro, and all these connections to JoyBoy. Yes, Roger and Luffy both have crew members with afros, but is that enough to make a distinct point on how exactly they're going to find the One Piece? In my honest opinion, no. But it's the fact that Luffy and Roger's crews both share this joyful and comical nature, and as a result, I definitely think that Luffy and his crew will laugh when seeing the One Piece as well. But how exactly did they find the One Piece? Simple. By making fun of the people with the afros. Throughout One Piece, Luffy has been prone to do impressions of other members of the Straw Hat crew, but I think when Luffy sees an afro on the ground on Laugh Tale, his immediate reaction will be to put it on and say that he's Brook. I personally believe that Roger might have gone through this exact same scenario, with JacksonBanner being made fun of because of his afro. But there's even the option of Luffy putting it on and remembering his time as Afro Luffy, which would be a great moment to show that the journey is indeed more important than the destination, opposing Blackbeard's fundamental beliefs. Blackbeard's crew is always so serious, only focusing on the One Piece itself and not the journey to get to the One Piece. As a result, they stop caring about trying to get to know each other and really feel comfortable around each other, which in turn makes them not actually realize what the true One Piece actually is. Only when people are willing to just let go and be able to have some fun, they'll be able to find the real One Piece, which was something nobody would have ever expected. While the Afro Tale example is something that's a bit more concrete, I definitely think that the One Piece will be found through the journey to get to the One Piece and the friends you've made along the way to get to the One Piece. What the One Piece is doesn't necessarily matter to me. What I think is more important is the duality between Luffy and Blackbeard's crews and how their differences affect how they reach the end goal of the story. There's a reason that Luffy was so distraught after losing Ace, but was only brought back from the depths of his own mind by the thought of his own crew, his friends, his backup, his support. Every captain might be the main character of their own story, but the crew is what allows the captain to be such a dynamic figure in the world. Having the One Piece only be found because of Luffy having his crew would be a really powerful way to end the story, seeing that Luffy's crew is the thing that helped him escape from the darkness within himself, and Blackbeard, being the person with a literal darkness ability, isn't going to find the One Piece because he doesn't care about his crew. It's a really cool dynamic in a way. One Piece is a comedy first and foremost, and it's really fitting that the crews that were focused more on the adventure and not the destination are the ones who are able to be more comfortable, more comical in general. And while Luffy and his crew are overjoyed by finding the One Piece, Blackbeard and his crew will be angered, frustrated, and in disbelief. Now, if JacksonBanner is important to all this or not, we'll just have to wait and see. Germa, no, not that Germa, Germa 66, is a kingdom filled with absolutely despicable people who I despise very, very much. Except Reiju, she's actually very nice, so she's fine. In the current cover story, we've been following their antics ever since the end of Whole Cake Island, and I personally think we're going to get a very, very big reveal for them coming, since we're on Vegapunk's island, Vegapunk is connected to Mads, and Germa is seemingly coming back to the story very soon. But what is it about the Germa Kingdom that I think is going to be divulged to the readers for the first time? Well, I think it has something to do with the two most integral parts of their kingdom, lineage factor experimentation and cloning experimentation. And I think we're going to learn the truth behind all four of the Vinsmoke brothers, not just Sanji, because I think there's something Oda's been hiding for us for a while. I decided to make a sub goal, 10,000 subs and I get a One Piece tattoo. If you're interested, subscribe, let's get into this. So a few days ago, I was on the most accursed website in the entire world, Twitter.com. Oh my god, the One Piece takes on this website are some of the worst I've ever seen. All you need to do is type Zoro or Sanji into your search bar and just see your timeline get absolutely destroyed. Or maybe you could do Zoro X Sanji, you know what I'm saying. I actually stumbled across a pretty interesting argument talking about the Germa siblings, and it's basically what started this entire rabbit hole thought about Germa coming back, Germa being important, so I'm just gonna walk you through it real quick. Every day I make myself forget how Niji and Yonji reacted with concern when Reiju was taken down in Whole Cake Island, and Ichiji literally had to remind them to let her go because she was weak. And this 100% doesn't fuel my theory that they do have some emotions. Now, I'm not saying Ichiji is the only Vinsmoke son that the surgery worked 100% on, but have you ever noticed that he's the only son that doesn't give any reactions when Sanji was constantly and rightfully ignoring, insulting, and rebuking the Vinsmokes? And obviously, these comments are very facetious, saying that they absolutely believe that something is up with the other Vinsmokes, and I agree. So this had me wondering about anything that's related to Germa's scientific technology, specifically lineage factor, because lineage factor has become such a massive thing, especially in modern One Piece, with the Seraphim having Lunarian DNA in them. So this had me wondering, maybe lineage factor has something to do with the way that Ichiji is very, very cold and heartless, while Niji and Yonji are a bit more emotional, but not necessarily just a brick wall like Ichiji. There has to be some sort of scientific explanation as to how Ichiji can be different from Niji and Yonji, and all three of them can be different from Sanji. So this had me thinking back to Fishman Island. And I know that might sound really, really confusing because Fishman Island doesn't have any connections to Whole Cake Island, at least. Alright, yeah, I can't do that. Whole Cake Island was first ever foreshadowed in Fishman Island. Therefore, Oda is sort of creating a link between these two arcs already, meaning that looking back on Fishman Island might have something to help us with stuff we've been introduced to in Whole Cake Island. So I did exactly that. I've been hyper-analyzing Fishman Island for about a month or two now. It's an arc that I really tend to come back to and realize more and more and more about what Oda can foreshadow in this arc, which is pretty crazy. And I have a mega theory in the works, hoping to get it out by the end of the month, so if that sounds interesting, consider sticking around. The Germa siblings absolutely frustrate me to no end because they are just so horrible. I hate them so much. But they're really compelling because somehow these people are going to end up as our allies at the end of the day. So where are the connections between genetics and Fishman Island? Because obviously I'm trying to find some sort of lineage factor thing with Germa. So there has to be some genetics related thing in Fishman Island. And there is. There's a whole explanation as to how fishmen and mer people are able to have children that look nothing like their previous ancestors, which is really cool because we even see that with Arlong and Charlie and with Tom and Den. Now let's look at this chart that Oda gave us in Fishman Island, and as you notice, there's 4 children, which makes this perfectly identical to the idea of a Punnett square, which is the idea that some genetics of the parents are more likely to be inherited depending on the dominant and recessive genes attributed to each possible child. The fact that there's 4 fishmen, I feel, is integral to this idea, because coincidentally enough, there are 4 of the Vinsmoke brothers. So let's look at them in a Punnett square example. While Sora was pregnant, Judge wanted to turn each of her 4 children into mindless, emotionless drones that he could control at basically any time. So he essentially wanted to manipulate the genes inside of her while they were incubating in order to turn them into this. Judge's experiment manipulated Sora's genes. Instead of being capital G, lowercase g, they're simply both capital G. This experiment basically ensured that all 4 of the kids would be the mindless, emotionless genotype, since they would all have the dominant gene because it's in 3 of the 4 locations. However, Sora was able to neutralize the poison in some fashion by poisoning herself, but she was actually able to save some of the kids, therefore turning the capital G into a capital G lowercase g, which would lead us to this result. As you can see, this leaves Ichiji as a solely emotionless drone. Sanji is the completely emotional character we all know and love, while Yonji and Niji are in the middle, having very negative emotions, but still having care for other people. We can see it very well in this scene where Reiju was hit by Big Mom, and Niji actually shows some concern for her. However, after this, Ichiji berates both Niji and Yonji, saying that Reiju only was able to be hit because she was weak. So what was this meant to conclude? That Ichiji is the worst Vinsmoke brother? One, he is. But no, I think this is going to allude right onto the things that we are currently facing, which is the Seraphim, because they are clones that are biologically manipulated as well with Lunarian DNA. Now I think this is going to be really similar to the Vinsmokes. Some of the Lunarians are going to have more of a order focus, and some of the Lunarians are going to have a more individual focus, and some might have specific little quirks that might make them overlap over their genetics. I'd say when Hancock interacts with Luffy, which hasn't happened yet, but definitely will, that she is going to blush, be uncontrollable, and do all the Boa Hancock things we love so much. And I'm curious to see how much of the nature versus nurture is going to come into play in this arc. Originally, Oda only planned for Sanji to have 1 brother and 1 sister. However, his daughter loved the show Osamatsu-san, which is a show about some sextuplets, so he wanted to have Sanji have more siblings in order to get his daughter to like his work, which is pretty cheeky but super adorable. If Oda wanted to mimic Osamatsu-san, why didn't he just make Sanji have 5 brothers, so he would be the 6th? We all know how Oda just loves to make characters for the sake of making characters and having a fun, expansive world. Just think about how many kids of Big Mom were introduced in just this arc alone. Sanji could have just had more bullying brothers. However, it's the fact that there's 4 of them and they're all distinct from one another, with genetics being the reason as to why. I feel like this is intentional, which could be foreshadowing for the Seraphim, seeing that Judge and Vegapunk are now connected, and possibly going to be interacting now in the story, now that we might get some insight as to what Mads actually was. As insane as it may sound, Sora sacrificing herself in order to save Sanji is going to be what we need in the present in order to figure out how to save the Seraphim. Think about what just happened on Egghead with Saul. If Sora's sacrifice is what we need to figure out how to defeat the Seraphim and turn them into people not controlled, that could be huge, and it could even revive the Lunarian race. And I think it would be a very powerful message if Sanji's mom, the person who's not this self-proclaimed amazing scientist, is the one who truly makes these scientific discoveries instead of her horrible husband. Did Oda inspire the Dressrosa storyline off of The Wizard of Oz, basing many of the main characters off of the characters from that book, along with a lot of the plot elements inside the arc itself? The Wizard of Oz is the most iconic fairy tale of the modern era, and personally, I was very surprised that it was not referenced whatsoever in Whole Cake Island, an arc basically completely inspired by fairy tales. However, when I remembered the Emerald City was mentioned all the way back in Jaya, and then we saw Greenbit, the wheels started turning. Dressrosa itself could be completely interpreted as a Wizard of Oz type story. In this video, I'm going to be talking about how many of the main characters introduced in the Dressrosa arc are emblematic of the characters from the Wizard of Oz, including their actual goals, how they achieve their goals, and the way the setting of Dressrosa itself is similar to the world of Oz. It's something I've been thinking about for a while, so I just wanted to talk about it because I think it's pretty cool, and the comparisons are actually pretty interesting in my opinion. Just wanted to make a quick little announcement for the actual video. Since the Vegapunk video has been absolutely blowing up, I decided to make a sub goal, 10,000 subs, and I get a One Piece tattoo. If you're interested, subscribe, let's get into this. So there are 5 major characters I'm going to be talking about through this video. Dorothy, the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, the Cowardly Lion, and the Wizard of Oz. However, I'm also going to be implementing elements from other major characters in the story, like the Wicked Witch of the West, but seeing that this is Dressrosa we're talking about, we can already assume who this Wicked Witch character is going to be based off of. So let's start this off with the character that I think represents Dorothy the most throughout Dressrosa, which might be obvious since this character has the strongest relations to the most characters and the strongest emotional weight in the arc, Rebecca. Now before you get your torches and pitchforks talking about how Rebecca's a trash character, her design sucks, and the flashback was played too much, I get it. But personally, I think she's pretty cool. I'd give her like a B tier. She's cool. She does have terrible fashion sense, but I think that her character is actually very well written and that many people sleep on analyzing her because of all the negativity surrounding her in Dressrosa. But putting aside all the manga versus anime differences, let's get right into what I think makes her character similar to Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. Rebecca's goal at the start of the story is to get the Mera Mera no Mi, defeat Doflamingo, and live with the toy soldier that raised her. And Dorothy's goal is to defeat the Wicked Witch of the West and get back to her home. So already these characters have the exact same motivation, being able to return to life with their loved ones. Now let's go back to that point I made about Dorothy and Rebecca getting the most bonds in their respective storylines. Dorothy is the literal main character. She constantly brings all these new people on her journey, hoping that they can also get something from the wizard. And Rebecca is the person that convinces Luffy to help this entire country because she's the one that gave him food. And the name Rebecca literally means to tie, bind, or join. Both of these characters are also known very well for never being violent to anyone or having a massive story arc about being non-violent. Rebecca, obviously, is infamous in the Colosseum, always making sure that she never actually wins by hurting someone. In the book, Dorothy can't even muster up the courage to actually attack the Wicked Witch of the West, ending up becoming her slave and allowing all of her friends to be captured by her. And Dorothy only beats the Wicked Witch of the West by an accident. She throws water on her, and that just happens to be her weakness. Rebecca also struggles holding back her violence during the fight with Diamante before Kyros adamantly tells her to not kill anyone because it would preserve her mother's innocence. I would say innocence is actually the best word to describe both of these characters because even though their worlds that they're stuck in are so crazy, they somehow manage to come out unscathed. But now that we're done talking about Rebecca, let's go right into Kyros, her father, and who I think he'll be, the Tin Man. And yes, there is more to this than him literally being a Tin Man. Without a doubt in my mind, Kyros is one of the most underrated characters of One Piece. He has everything going for him. Great action, great mystery, a really good backstory, and really emotional moments, especially the end of the arc. But a lot of people don't really give him the credit he deserves, and I think that's a bit crazy, since when I looked at him from this perspective, he became an even better character in my opinion. So the film version basically completely gets rid of the reason why the Tin Man is the Tin Man, which I think adds a lot to the reason why I think he's just like Kyros. So I thought the best way of going about this would be for me to literally tell you the Tin Man's story, and you get to see some cool pictures as well from the comic that I've been showing. Before the events of the actual story, the Tin Man and a Munchkin girl were in love. Unfortunately though, the Munchkin girl's mother very much did not want her to get married, and actually paid the Wicked Witch of the East, the one that Dorothy ended up killing, to ensure that the Tin Man wouldn't be able to build a house for the two of them. The witch enchants the axe that the Tin Man used, and almost perfectly, one leg is the first thing that gets cut off, very similar to Kiro's. However, the Tin Man perseveres, becoming just more and more tin as he continues to get chopped up more and more by this enchanted axe, leading to him being eventually completely tin. However, there's one huge problem. Now that he has become completely tin, he doesn't have a heart and doesn't feel the feelings that he had for this woman he's in love with. So he wants to go to the wizard to actually see if he can regain these feelings of love and happiness. Now this obviously reminds me of Kiros because both the characters are tin men achieving to have some semblance of humanity return to them. However, the tragic part in Kiros' case is that everyone forgot about him because he was turned into a toy. The Tin Man is even more tragic, saying he's not even sure if this girl will actually be in love with him at the end of the story. Kiros obviously wants to isolate himself even more from Rebecca, worrying that he will put her in danger because of all the terrible things he's done in the past. So, both the characters are very tragic figures, caring about people very deeply, but knowing that if they return to them, they might not be able to give them the love they deserve, so they would rather isolate themselves instead. Now here's where the main difference occurs. In DRESSROSA, Kiros and Rebecca obviously reconvene and become a happy family like they always wanted to. But in The Wizard of Oz, the Tin Man actually never returns to this girl, which is kind of crazy. Like, he actually just leaves and he actually becomes the leader of an entire nation in Oz, which is crazy. But we'll get into the actual geography of DRESSROSA and Oz and how that matters later on in this video. I generally think these two have the tightest connections to one another. Both of them are noble men who care significantly about their loved ones, are turned into metal soldiers, and have sacrificed parts of their physical form in order to achieve their goals. I know that might have been a lot because the Tin Man is significantly different than what he is in the actual film, but I thought that going into his character in depth was much more important since it's so drastically different from the actual film. But now, let's get into who I think is going to be the Scarecrow, Leo. The Tontadas were sentenced to work as slaves by the original Don Quixote kings of DRESSROSA, and Doflamingo continued this tyranny when he took control of DRESSROSA again, forcing the Tontadas to be farmers in a smile factory. Now, the comparison between the Tontadas and the Munchkins are as clear as day, with both being a mystical race we are first introduced to when our heroes arrive. However, the focus is on Leo specifically, being similar to the Scarecrow, so I'll be focusing on that point exclusively. Outside of being a literal scarecrow on a farm, the Scarecrow focuses on his lack of intellect and inferiority to others, issues that many farmers were facing in the media in the 1800s. Although he is seen as very intelligent and competent throughout the book, he still looks down on himself. This is very similar to how the Tontada tribe views Usoland and Robbieland as their saviors because they have been beaten down so badly by Doflamingo's tyranny. They have been wanting to rise up against this man for years, but needed a guiding force along their way, which only happens once the Straw Hats arrive. Leo is incredibly gullible, like every other member of the Tontada tribe, but he's depicted as even more gullible than any other member of his group. This all results from his obliviousness towards the princess's feelings towards him. This harkens to the Scarecrow's lack of intellect, more so meaning that he just doesn't understand normal social cues, like sarcasm, and how people's emotions change from person to person. To further the parallel, Leo is also in possession of the Stitch fruit, and uses it to ensure the safety of others in many daring ways, even taking down many of Doflamingo's highest ranking agents. The Scarecrow only realizes his true potential once she is given a bunch of needles in his head as well, and finally feeling as though he has a sharp mind, he becomes the king of the Emerald City itself. After the events of DRESSROSA, Leo also becomes the leader of his own group, the Tontada Pirates, and a valued member of the Straw Hat Grand Fleet, as well as one of the protectors of the Riku royal family. This feeling of inferiority that the Tontadas had at the start of the story has vanished thanks to Luffy's actions, and they are now a welcome part of DRESSROSA rather than being forced in the shadows. Both of these characters have heavy themes around stitching, believing in oneself, and realizing the powers of one's intellect. Although I was a bit skeptical of this connection at the start, since the Tontadas seemed a bit too out there, I definitely see the connection, as Leo is one of the most pivotal characters we meet at the start of the DRESSROSA arc. I would say that the most confusing of the four connections would have to be Bartolomeo and the Cowardly Lion. You might not think that there's that much connecting the two besides their animalistic complexion, but they actually have the same character arc. Bartolomeo acts very arrogantly in his first appearance, and is revealed to have a barrier ability, keeping him safe from harm. which again might allude to the Cowardly Lion if it was seen as someone who is more scared and meek. However, when Bartolomeo realizes that Luffy is actually on Dressrosa, this intimidating facade that he puts up in the Colosseum disappears completely, and he becomes the obsessed fanboy that we all love so much. Once Bartolomeo realizes his hero is on the island, his insecurities come to light as well. Bartolomeo was inspired by Luffy and wants to see him become the Pirate King more than anything else in the world. However, Bartolomeo feels like he isn't even worth helping someone like Luffy, constantly putting him on a pedestal rather than seeing him as an equal. Even during his fight with Gladius, Bartolomeo isn't even sure he'll be able to defeat him on his own. So the only way he's able to do so is to muster up the courage to act like this person that's inspired him for such a long time. Now, the Cowardly Lion actually has a very similar entrance to the story as Bartolomeo. The Cowardly Lion is very intimidating, trying to attack both the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and then Toto trying to get some food. But Dorothy slaps him away, telling him, "Don't mess with my dog," and then he starts crying, showing that this was all a facade. And I know people might say this goes against the claim I made earlier about Dorothy being non-violent, but slapping someone's a lot different than killing someone. They're meant to be very villainous, and then basically instantly our perception of them does a complete 180, and they're seen as super adorable and charming. In reality, both these characters are incredibly brave, yet they put themselves in a state of mind where they could constantly be better. The lion obviously learns from the wizard that he has the bravery inside of him this entire time. But Bartolomeo actually learns that from the best person he could possibly learn it from, Luffy. But I'll get more into why I think Luffy is important later on in the story, because obviously Luffy's important to this arc. But first, let's talk about why I think Doflamingo is the Wizard of Oz. In this section, I'll also start going into the actual geography of Dressrosa, seeing as Doflamingo is able to manipulate it any way he wants. I'm also going to talk about the way that Dressrosa is presented at a face level, which is very important obviously in this arc. Let's get some obvious ones out of the way right now. They're both rulers that have overseen massive changes in their nations, both people that have usurped the previous rulers of that land, both people that constantly lie to all their followers, both people that are seen as massive beacons of hope for their respective lands. But now let's get into more specifics that I thought were very fascinating. Doflamingo always wears these sunglasses. Even in the SBS's, when Oda tries to make Doflamingo take off his sunglasses, he's still wearing sunglasses. When Oz actually arrives to this new world, so green and beautiful, he forces every single other person to wear green sunglasses in order for them to see the city the way he did. Both Doflamingo and Oz try to make these places seem as beautiful as possible, but in Doflamingo's case, it's only beautiful because it's hiding an evil secret. Both of these characters are able to make people see the world from a different perspective, which is essential when you're hiding the truth from your citizens. And for the most on-the-nose connection yet, the Wizard of Oz claims to be a ventriloquist before traveling to the New World, and Doflamingo has a string ability. Fittingly, both of these rulers have a habit of using puppets. With all this involved, the most important thing I want you to get from this is the fact that Doflamingo and the Wizard of Oz both realize... Hello. Check chapter 794, huh? Sure, okay. So you're telling me that Oda, in one of the final chapters of Dressrosa, does a cover page of a flamingo pretending to be Doflamingo, puppeteering not just any strange characters, but the exact ones that are filling this arc with references to them and their folklore. Like, the arc isn't even over, there's no puppeteering in the prompt, there's no Wizard of Oz in the prompt. Like, Oda, are you driving me crazy? The main thing I want you to take away from this is the difference between the two of these men. While the Wizard of Oz genuinely wants to help people by giving them advice, yet lacks the capability to do so, Doflamingo wants to manipulate people into following his will by showing off his powers, while he in turn does nothing to help them. A Wicked Witch type character under the guise of a benevolent wizard. A perfect fit for someone named the Heavenly Demon. Now, since I'm claiming that Dressrosa is actually inspired by the Wizard of Oz, one of the biggest fan theories going around could be answered right here. Is the Emerald City actually on Dressrosa? Or is it an island just a bit to the north of it? Greenbit is an Emerald City, but not really representative of what it means to be the Emerald City. Sure, the island is connected to Dressrosa and is covered with gorgeous greenery. Sure, the island was visited by Nolan, who was associated with the City of Gold, which was first mentioned in the Skypiea saga along with the Emerald City. And sure, Bellamy even returns this arc and now believes in dreams in the same arc, meaning that he might believe in the Emerald City as well. There's a lot alluding to the idea that the Emerald City is Greenbit, and it very well might be. But in all regards, the real Emerald City isn't even on the surface of Dressrosa. It's the horrors that lie underneath the surface that truly resemble the Emerald City the most. In this section, I'm going to be talking a lot about not only the plot of Dressrosa, but a big geography lesson, so get ready. I just wanted to give this a different section marker, just letting you know that here's where things are really going to start getting in-depth. Underneath the Kurita Coliseum and the Royal Palace is the real Emerald City, the horrific factory and shipyard where Doflamingo rules from. Before Pika starts terraforming the nation, they are in the exact center of Dressrosa, just like how the Emerald City is the epicenter of Oz. Doflamingo being settled here allows him to oversee everything that goes on in Dressrosa. Fittingly so, the Colosseum is what brings all these gladiators to the country, with Doflamingo playing up his role as the wizard by offering the Mera Mera no Mi. The temptation is too great to pass up. However, all the people that lose in this Colosseum are turned into toy slaves and forced to work directly underneath where they just fought. Now, I'm really excited to get into this toy aspect because it has some insane ties to the Wizard of Oz. The movie has Dorothy head right home after she discovers the truth of the wizard, but in the book, she goes on another short journey to meet the Good Witch of the South. The first place that our heroes go to outside of the Emerald City is a place called Chinatown, a town where all the people and buildings are made of literal china. One of the people from this town talks about the horrors of leaving, saying that they wouldn't be able to move anymore. This reminded me a ton of the toy people from Dressrosa, since they are only deemed as toys and nothing more, which would be the exact same position that these people would be put in. They aren't deemed as people anymore, only decorations. It's a horrifying thought, and one that I can definitely see Oda giving to a monster like Doflamingo with the creation of Sugar and the Hobby Hobby no Mi ability. One of the most distinct landmarks in Dressrosa is Flower Hill, which gets terraformed to surround the new location of Doflamingo's palace. This is highly reminiscent of the poppy field that the quartet goes through in The Wizard of Oz, which leads directly to the Emerald City in the film. Surrounding Doflamingo's palace, there were only 4 towns named, which is the exact setup of the Land of Oz. 4 lands to the north, south, east, and west, with the Emerald City in the center. Doflamingo's palace is also surrounded by an immense barrier, which is also identical to the Emerald City being surrounded by a large gate. And now here's the crazy part. This map that I've been showing you this entire time is just a small portion of the world of Oz, just like how Dressrosa is a small portion of the One Piece world. This is the Oz that we've known in the cultural zeitgeist, but this is the real Land of Oz. As you can see, around the Land of Oz there is an impassable desert in which nobody is able to travel through or else you'll die. Doflamingo, with the use of the birdcage, essentially creates this impassable desert in Dressrosa itself, causing everything surrounding his location to slowly get turned into nothing. However, there are ways to get around this desert, like tunnels connecting the land to the rest of the world, which is again seen in Dressrosa, with Doflamingo's factory below the surface. Had the factory not been destroyed by Usopp prior to this birdcage, Doflamingo would have been able to keep his business in check and start fresh with a demolished Dressrosa. And even if you don't believe that the birdcage is meant to represent the impassable desert, there's a much more obvious option as well. The One Piece Sea is one of the most treacherous places in the entire world, especially so in the new world where Dressrosa resides. The characters, motivations, settings, and plot all have connections to the Wizard of Oz, but how exactly do the characters achieve their goals at the end of the story? Simple. They do it just like how they do in the Wizard of Oz. They do it themselves, rather than being handed something by someone else. Now, I'm not sure how many of you saw this coming because I mentioned Luffy earlier when I talked about Bartolomeo and Rebecca, but now we're getting into why I think that Luffy is the best example of the wizard type character in this arc. Luffy has always said that he wants to surpass the villains that he defeats, so of course, in this aspect, he absolutely surpasses Doflamingo in his role as the wizard. The Wizard of Oz is essentially a scam artist, not having any actual grand powers, and giving people placebo effect goodies to ensure that they believe in themselves. While Doflamingo would present empty offers like he did with Bellamy, Luffy would actually genuinely try to help these people and care about them. And he does this especially well with the 4 characters I think represent the Oz Quartet. He helps Rebecca get to her father so they can live together happily like they both want to, but only after she says it's what she wants. He further helps inspire the Tontadas to rise up against Doflamingo and return to their lives of freedom. The Tontadas were the ones that inspired Luffy to help them. meaning he is helping them achieve their goal, not the other way around. And he especially helps Bartolomeo by showing him that he cares about him not as an underling, but as a friend, something Bartolomeo has wanted ever since he saw Luffy all the way back in Logtown. Luffy pushes all of these characters to live their best lives while he takes down the man that tries to manipulate them to his will. As corny as it may sound, Luffy shows them that they were capable of achieving their goals through their own determination rather than needing something extra. Now, there's one last question I want to bring up before ending off this video. If Greenbit isn't the Emerald City, where is the Emerald City? I've always assumed that Laugh Tale itself would have the Emerald City on it. It makes perfect sense that the mystical city where all one's dreams can come true would be the location of the One Piece. But a new theory going around is that God Valley is actually the Emerald City, which would mean that it was wiped off the map by Emu decades ago. I think this is a pretty cool concept, since it would emphasize the connection to Shandora, with both the lands seemingly being lost and impossible to find. If you want to see a theory around this topic, check out the card above to see one from Marshall D. Preach. While I don't agree with all the reasoning he gives to the theory, I think the idea of God Valley being the Emerald City in itself is a really novel concept, and I'm curious to see where that will go. If Greenbit is really meant to represent the Emerald City, that's totally fine by me. As I've shown in this video, Dressrosa has many allusions to the Wizard of Oz, so I don't really see a problem if the Emerald City doesn't show up again in the narrative. But if there is an Emerald City the Straw Hats learn about or visit later down the line, possibly like the adventure they had on Skypiea, I would be overjoyed. And who knows, maybe we'll get another great arc filled to the brim with even more Wizard of Oz references. Before I wrap up the rest of this video, I just want to say two things. Thank you incredibly so much for anyone who's found this channel or supported the channel from the Vegapunk video. At this point, we're already at 5,000 views on the theory, and it seems like it's going to go to 6,000 by the time that this is done and uploaded, which is just crazy, really crazy. You know, I've wanted this theory to be sort of big in the community for a while, and it might get to this point, which is just really cool, and I'm really happy for it. But more importantly, if there's anything about this analysis video comparing Dressrosa to the Wizard of Oz that got you really interested in the Wizard of Oz, I would absolutely recommend you check these things out. Years ago when I was at a bookstore, there were some really cool collections of the Wizard of Oz. This is the first 5 books. Unfortunately, I was not able to get my hands on the 6 to 10 collection. I haven't seen them around for a really long time, but if you can somehow manage to get your hands on some of these, I would definitely give them a shot because they're really short, they're really just fun and creative, and the drawings are actually pretty frequent. You know, it's oftentimes full page stuff, and each of the chapters starts with a drawing as well. It's really cool, and just I like the art style a lot. I would definitely recommend looking into them if you have the chance. One of my favorite comic artists, Scotty Young, actually completely redid the first 6 Oz novels into comic books, and they look really great. I absolutely adore Scotty Young's art style. I would definitely recommend checking them out as well if you're more of a fan of manga and comics and want to experience this world in a somewhat similar way. Obviously, you won't get all of the stories because it's only the first 6, but you'll get a lot, so I would definitely recommend. You can obviously get versions of the Wizard of Oz without the original art style, but I think it kind of loses a lot of the charm that made it so appealing because of how wacky and weird everything looks with this really distinct art style. I kind of think a lot of the newer ones look a bit like Roald Dahl imitation art styles, and they just don't feel the same. That might sound a bit pretentious because obviously you can read them and get them much cheaper, but it's a lot of the appeal is gone in my opinion without the original artist's vision. There's also a lot of TV shows, plays like Wicked, a lot of stuff to immerse yourself in this world if you find it interesting. And with that, hopefully you enjoyed this video. I really enjoyed making it, so I don't really mind. If you enjoyed this video, consider supporting the channel. I do theories, analysis, chapter reactions, and some other stuff for other series that aren't One Piece if you like that as well. And with that, take care and have a good one. This might be a bit crazy of me to say, but I'm just going to be straight up and just say that Buggy is definitely a character from One Piece that I just absolutely adore. I know many people think Buggy is just a meme, and I would know from all the Buggy D clown memes that make him such an amazing character, but honestly, I just don't care, because ever since Marineford, when Buggy freed all those prisoners, I feel as though every single second he's on screen, he just gets better and better and better. Oda really took this character that was meant to be a complete joke and turned him into legitimately the real life meme of the One Piece world, and every second he's on screen, I love. Now I know you saw the thumbnail and thought this is just going to be another shitpost, because most Buggy related content is a meme as much as he is, but I'm being completely serious when I say that this stupid theory of mine is completely unironically my own thoughts. Now, why? Just why? Why would you believe this? Why are you genuinely seriously thinking Buggy will be the Yonko and not Law or Kid or Katakuri or Marco? Like a genuine pick? No, you think it's Buggy? Well, I will tell you. Ever since Marineford, as I said, Buggy has become this masterpiece of a character where every single second he's on screen, he becomes more and more important to the world, when all of us know that Buggy is a complete joke. This is first shown in Marineford, where we see Buggy as the sole camera point of view for the entire rest of the world, so most other people are seeing Buggy as this massive figure, and Buggy is also getting reveals from many people within Marineford as well, showing that the Marines also think that he is a highly valued person who has just been laying low this entire time. Obviously, this is where Buggy's entire meme began, of being this really important figure, when in reality he is completely the opposite, even though he has all these connections. So it is in fact true, all the things that people are saying about him. However, his actual abilities are vastly overestimated. Now, as the series has continued and we learned more about Buggy, I feel as though his meme will be grown more and more and more, because I see one specific concept that really is striking me in a very interesting way. Ever since the beginning of the series, Buggy has been after treasure. That's his entire gimmick at the start, being obsessed with treasure, and that's his contrast with Luffy. Now, in Impel Down, when Buggy finally returns to the story, Luffy gladly offers him the treasure in exchange for helping him get Ace out of Impel Down. This treasure, as we learned very early on in the series, but also as we've learned very recently, is Captain John's treasure. Now, we know that Captain John is something that Buggy has been really trying to acquire for years and years now, but we finally just learned who Captain John is really very recently in the grand scheme of the story, as a member of the Rocks Pirates. Buggy is first seen going after Captain John's treasure after Jaya, which is also coincidentally when Blackbeard and Whitebeard are finally introduced into the story. Now, Buggy has always had a really strong connection between both of these characters. In Marineford, Buggy's entire goal is killing Whitebeard, the same as Crocodile actually, but for Buggy, it's not for revenge, it's for fame. And Buggy, as revealed in the Odin flashback, has always had this weird paranoia of Blackbeard, and comes up with the idea that Blackbeard has never slept once in his entire life, which shows that Buggy has this really strong apprehension towards Blackbeard. In chapter 956, there is a very interesting connection made. We get to see that Blackbeard is going off to acquire something because the Navy is too focused on the disbandment of the warlords, and I think it's really interesting that the first warlord that they show is Buggy. The next chapter immediately follows up on who exactly is Rocks and the Rocks Pirates themselves, and there was a really clear connection established that Blackbeard is very similar to Rocks, and just like how Luffy is very similar to Roger. In this chapter, we also learn that Captain John is a member of the Rocks Pirates, but obviously Captain John being on Thriller Bark negates that Captain John has been long dead, just like Rocks himself. Now, the reason I bring up these specific points is because I believe now that Blackbeard is on the move and Buggy is trying to escape from the Navy, I believe that Buggy is going to try and follow Captain John's treasure. Now, it might be strange, but since Blackbeard is finally gone, I feel like Buggy, when arriving at the island, he'll notice that Blackbeard isn't there, and thus it will be reported by Big News Morgans, who loves to just stir the pot because, you know, it's big news. I believe that Big News Morgans will report that Buggy the Clown has stolen this massive legendary treasure right from under the nose of one of the 4 emperors. I think that Oda is so strong at pushing a meme, not only because of a gag, which he loves to do because One Piece is very focused on humor, but I feel as though this would finally give Buggy a fully finalized moment in the story, while also making it realistic on how he would become a Yonko and continue progressing further and further into the world's power system. Now, I know other people have thought of other possibilities on what would happen to Buggy after the Navy has started attacking the warlords, and personally, I do not think that Oda would write the progression of Buggy's character in these ways. The 2 ways that I've seen many people say are that Buggy would head to Shanks, which I am in complete disagreement with, because as shown in Marineford, he only would use Shanks if it would make him look better. However, he doesn't even need to do that, since arguing with Shanks alone makes him look much better than going with Shanks would. And the second thing is that Buggy would get arrested again, which again, I highly disagree, because I doubt that Oda would ever write going back to Impel Down a second time, because we already went once. Now, I know this video might seem a bit weird because it's not really a serious theory. It's just a thought that I've had for quite a while that I believe very, very affirmedly about Buggy of all characters. So I know many people will just dismiss it, put it to the side, but genuinely, I think that this theory has some really strange connections, as I've noticed with Captain John being in the rocks and Blackbeard being on the rocks island of founding. And I just think it would be really cool if Captain John's treasure was indeed on Blackbeard's island, because that would have some funny gag moments, not just for Buggy being afraid of Blackbeard, but my final point is that it would be a really cool connection way back to the introduction of this treasure, way back in Skypiea. In the clip I showed way earlier of Buggy exploring this island, coincidentally, the island seems to have this massive skull cave. Now, Full of Lead Island, also known as Beehive, which is the founding island that the rocks were formed on and where Blackbeard is based, also has this massive skull rock formation. So I believe that that would be the legendary cave that Buggy has been looking for ever since all the way back in Jaya. So yeah, that is my stupid Buggy theory that I've genuinely had for quite a long time. Ever since the reveal of the rocks, I felt as though Buggy had to get involved with it somehow. Everything you know about Egghead is a lie. Egghead was said to be the island of the future, but it's actually the island of the past. Egghead was said to have Dr. Vegapunk there, but there's actually 7 Dr. Vegapunks, and they're all trying to kill each other. We were supposed to have a chill arc after Wano, but now we're seeing all the absolute insanity of the world coming to a critical mass. CP0's here, an admiral's here, a member of the Gorosei is named and here, so it's perfectly fitting that Oda turned the creativity notch up even further, with Vegapunk's island being a massive collage of colorful machinery and toy-like wonder. However, this wonder is cut short because of the reveal of holograms being a thing in the One Piece world. Through the use of holograms, Oda is able to draw literally anything, which is a really interesting parallel now that we know that Luffy is able to do literally anything. This connection to fantasy and fiction is pushed even further when Luffy, Jinbei, and Chopper meet Atlas, who comes to the story with an absolute banger of a quote. "Debates on what makes something real are as old as time. It's something you'll have to decide for yourself, but I consider the matter settled." And this is a really powerful quote, but the second that Atlas introduces themselves as Dr. Vegapunk, Bonnie instantly thinks to herself how that's a total lie, planting the seeds of distrust already this early in the arc. And although Bonnie might not believe what Atlas is saying, I personally think this quote is the most important thing Luffy is going to learn throughout the arc. Let's think about what just happened at Leloucia in chapter 1060. With one quick attack, Imu eviscerated an island's worth of people in an attempt to erase them from history. But unfortunately for Imu, this is One Piece, a world that's so interconnected even though it seems like an island-hopping adventure. No man is an island. People will have their will inherited. Even though Lulusia is seemingly gone forever, it will never really be gone, because no one dies until they're forgotten. And all I'm going to say is if Moda the Milkmaid is dead, I'm not going to be happy. It would make the Revolutionary Army look like a bunch of jokers, because they were just recently on Lulusia, and now the entire island's gone. It seems like all the effort they put into inspiring these people to rise up against Imu would be for naught, and make them look like a complete joke in my opinion. That could even go further to show that Imu is that powerful, and I believe that in this arc we're going to figure out exactly what Uranus is, because firstly, I believe that Uranus is the thing that Imu used to destroy Lulusia, and secondly, I feel as though all the things connecting Egghead to the Ancient Kingdom will be explained through the reveal of what Uranus is, and it all has to do with the main aesthetic appearance of Egghead, which is obviously sci-fi, but the main reference throughout most of the entire island, video games. Oda has been teasing video game allusions for months now. While Usopp and Nami are playing the One Piece world's equivalent of Smash, we see Luffy in a very similar outfit to Ryu, but with his signature Gear 5 hairstyle. This immediately plants the seed of this color spread being important, since it was one of the most obvious examples of Gear 5 before Oda truly revealed Luffy's awakening to us. Let's look at the setting of Egghead. I remember specifically noticing the Mario question block in the first spread that showcased Vegapunk's lab, and more recently, there's a Game Boy Advance with the word Vega plastered across it. And Vegapunk and his 6 satellites could be a cheeky little reference to the original Mega Man, facing against Dr. Wily and his 6 robot masters. Right underneath Luffy is Zoro, donning Link's iconic tunic and hat. Is it possible that Oda was pulling inspiration from The Legend of Zelda at the time of drawing this color spread as well? The Legend of Zelda is undoubtedly one of the greatest video game franchises of all time. It's hard to come across a series that houses what many people consider to be the greatest game of all time. Zelda has 2 of these, Ocarina of Time, which released over 2 decades ago, and just recently with Breath of the Wild. The series is cross-generational, timeless, and continues to resonate with millions across the world, just like a certain manga we're all obsessed with, wouldn't you say? But why exactly Zelda? The main video game reference for the Egghead arc is The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening. And it's not just because of the setting itself. This game and this arc are really similar, not just in setting, but in theme most importantly. So I'm going to do a comparison of the things in Link's Awakening to One Piece, and what I think could be inspired from Link's Awakening in the main One Piece narrative. And who knows? If Egghead is actually inspired by The Legend of Zelda, this could not only explain what I think Uranus will be, it will reinforce one of the greatest themes in the entire story, and maybe even reveal to us how the Ancient Kingdom was destroyed. As a basic starting point, Link and Luffy both wash ashore on this island that both coincidentally have massive eggs as the centerpiece for the island. Both the settings are really grand and bizarre, even in terms of what One Piece has to offer and what Zelda has to offer. Something I haven't really talked about is how Link's Awakening is also very self-referential to many other Nintendo games at the time. Having stuff like Chain Chomps and Goombas as major enemies in a Zelda game is not a thing. This decision makes you wonder if this is actually an intentional sort of in-joke, or if there's something more to it. And clearly, there is something more to it, but we'll get into that later. But let's get to the goals of both these arcs. The goal of Egghead right now is to get Dr. Vegapunk off of Egghead, to remove him from the egg. And the goal of Link's Awakening is to go inside of the egg and wake up this thing called the Windfish. Of course, there are some evil forces trying to make sure none of them can achieve their goals. Luffy has to deal with CP0, an admiral, and one of the Gorosei, while Link has to deal with these forces called the Sirens, who are trying to ensure that the Windfish stays asleep inside of the egg. And it is an interesting connection that these villains are trying to force something to continuously stay asleep, which goes against the idea of One Piece and dreams being such an important factor of the story. But now, let's talk about what the Windfish actually is, or should I say, Uranus. Uranus is a sky whale. Now, before you completely lose all faith in this, I know what you'll be thinking. There's never been any sky whale in the entirety of the story. However, whales have consistently been the most important animals in the story, whether it be the greatness that is Laboon, Whitebeard's monster of a ship, the Moby Dick, or the whale tree in Zoe. It's obvious to tell that whales are associated with important things in the story. But let's break this down further. With Oda fully reconnecting Skypiea to the main narrative through the use of Gear 5, I wouldn't be shocked in the slightest if Uranus was based on an animal that we met in the Skypiea arc. And although there haven't been any sky whales, there have been sky fish and sky sharks. So we know that there is a possibility of animals being able to swim through the clouds. We also know that fish have a capability of flying in the One Piece world from Duval and the Flying Fish Riders, who make their entrance in the story right before the Sabati Archipelago arc. And what do you know it? Egghead is chock full of callbacks to that same arc. But in case you're still somehow not convinced on the idea of a sky whale, let's look at the first ever page of Egghead and Vegapunk's lab, and what do we see? A whale floating in the sky. Now, a major counter argument could obviously be that people think Uranus is a ship. Emu could only be using a ship that looks like a straw hat, or the Arc Maxim, or maybe the hieroglyphics on the moon that Enel saw in his cover story. However, when we first enter the Grand Line, we meet a whale, Laboon. This whale is also a ship, with Crocus being inside of him to take care of him, having a sort of symbiotic relationship within one another. And we also see Whitebeard, at the midpoint of the story, have a ship that looks like a whale. The Arc Maxim didn't really do anything for Enel in particular. However, Enel was still able to rain down subjugation for all the people of Skypiea using deadly beams, which are incredibly similar to the attack that we saw on Lucia. In Japanese culture, whales are oftentimes appreciated and awe-inspired for what they offer for a grand spectacle of a creature. However, the second that whales are seen as endangered or possibly away from their awe-inspiring status, they are basically immediately murdered, which reminds me a lot of what happened to Doflamingo and his family when they went down to the surface. If these whales are sort of deified in the One Piece world as well, is it possible that Emu could be using a whale as his grand weapon to subjugate others? But that raises the question, how exactly is this creature able to do a 16-pronged attack that allows it to completely wipe out islands? We just need to simply look at the creature and notice that on its fins, there are 8 distinctive bulges on each of them, meaning it has some capability of producing something with 16 distinctly similar attributes. Let's look back at the Skypiea arc again, specifically the beginning, and a character Oda dropped into the story, Willie Karen, with a very poignant quote, "Anything that man can imagine is a possibility in reality." Now, this obviously has connections to Luffy's power, which is first foreshadowed with the Sun God in Skypiea, but it's also a very interesting callback to what Atlas said at the beginning of Egghead, because anything you can imagine could become real if you just believe in it, like how Luffy does all the time. Plus, there's already been so many crazy animals in One Piece, I wouldn't be shocked in the slightest if a sky whale just so happened to exist. And this would lead to a great parallel forming between Luffy and Emu. Both of them have befriended whales, Luffy at the bottom of Reverse Mountain, and Emu at the top of Marie Joie. And ironically enough, both of these places are directly opposing each other on the world map. One's at the bottom of the world, and one's right at the top. One of the whales wants to destroy the Red Line, where it's very likely that Emu is using Uranus to ensure the Red Line can never be destroyed. With all of that stuff out of the way, and now that we're assuming Uranus is this sort of sky whale, why exactly am I saying that this is, without a doubt, 100% what I'm thinking? We're going to have to get into major spoiler territory for Link's Awakening. So if you have any interest in playing this game, do not watch the rest of this video because it will spoil a major plot point. Do you remember at the start of this video where I said everything on Egghead is a lie? Now take that concept and apply it to the greatest extreme possible, and then you got the plot of Link's Awakening. Everything on Koholint Island isn't real. That's the reason why the developers actually put in all the Nintendo references, just to give us the idea that this is so unbelievable, that nothing in this game should be a real thing. And that's because none of it is a real thing. But when I say a real thing, I'm talking about the conventional meaning, not what Vegapunk thinks, where anything that someone can imagine can be a real thing, since it's anything anyone could imagine, so it's feasibly possible to exist. In this case, everything in Link's Awakening is a real thing, because it is something he imagined, and that's because everything in Link's Awakening is a dream. And this dilemma has popped up in One Piece over and over again, but most recently with the reveal of God Valley being a thing. Many of the Marines who have never even heard of God Valley couldn't believe it was real. Sengoku had Mayor McCheese here just shook. But God Valley was a real thing. Just because people didn't know about it didn't mean it didn't happen. And the same thing could be said about the plight of the ancient kingdom and the world before the world government. Because of the Void Century erasing all that history, people might not know it even happened. But the Windfish literally even says, someday thou might recall this island, and that memory makes the dream world real. So many people didn't even believe what Sengoku was saying, but because Sengoku said it, it now exists in their minds. It's now an idea that they can picture and actually have a concept of. As we wake up the Windfish, we see this island, Koholint Island, with many characters and people that we've grown to love over this journey vanish into this white void. All of it becomes something that we have to accept as something that isn't real. It's something we've experienced. It's characters we've grown to appreciate. The island we've spent all this time on. It's not real, yet it is real because it's something we've experienced and felt. Just like all the people in One Piece who have passed, or all the people in One Piece who have influenced others to continue inheriting their will, this place will live on. And just like Koholint, a land that supposedly never existed, Leloucia goes out in the exact same way, with a big blinding ball of light and the island dissipating right in front of our eyes. Uranus, or the Windfish, could be representative of the One Piece world itself. They were living a peaceful, beautiful dream until the nightmares took over. Imu destroying the world's peace and creating the world government, subjugating others and turning this world into a true dark age. The nightmares do the same to the Windfish, continually causing it to stay asleep and be under their subjugation as well. And the fight to wake up the Windfish isn't actually a fight with the Windfish's nightmares, it's actually your own nightmares. In this case, it would be Luffy's nightmares. There are many people who think Imu could be Umi or the Mother Sea. Now that we know that devil fruits are made in pure defiance of the Mother Sea, this could truly push the duality of Imu and Luffy. I really love this idea, but Oda's always been someone to use English in terms of characters, settings, locations, so I had another idea for what Imu could be. Imu wouldn't be I am you, it would literally mean I am you. I am you, the embodiment of your nightmares. I am the nightmare of the world, and Luffy, you are the dreamer. It's no wonder that Luffy's power has finally been revealed as imagination, the perfect thing to go up against a dictator who's been ruling the world, causing everyone to stop thinking about how hopeful the world could be, while Luffy, with his childlike mind and innocent nature, is able to truly see a world where everyone can truly be together. And this would even make Blackbeard a more interesting character. Blackbeard is nothing like Imu in this regard. If Imu is the subjugation of dreams and imagination, Blackbeard and Luffy are truly two sides of the same coin. Both of them still believe that dreams are the most powerful thing in the world, and that even though dreams aren't a real thing, and dreams aren't something that can tangibly be grasped, dreams never have to end. Dreams are real. Dreams are something that can affect others and the world itself if you believe hard enough, while Imu tries to subjugate these dreams from even taking hold because of how powerful they can be. But even though everything in Link's Awakening is a dream, and it isn't actually physical or tangible, Oda's been pushing in this very arc that dreams and memories do have weight to them, and mean a lot to a lot of people. Uranus is a sky whale because of the game. Imu's this monster, nightmare embodiment because of the game. But there's one last thing I haven't even mentioned yet. The first thing that Link remembers when he wakes up is the song that he played to wake up the Windfish. And do you know what the Windfish actually calls this song? The Song of Awakening. You could say Luffy's Drums of Liberation are the lead instrument in the song of his and the world's awakening, but Link plays 8 distinct instruments when awakening the Windfish. Is this 8 connective tissue going to play out to this theory that many of the kingdoms of the past were in an alliance with the Ancient Kingdom and JoyBoy? But that's a theory. That's not concrete evidence that this number 8 is important. But we already know that the number 8 is important in the present time in the One Piece world because of the 8-nation revolution that Sabo has spurred on. This makes me think that this 8 connected kingdoms in the past has to be something important if this 8 connected kingdoms in the present is something right now. And although the Drums of Liberation is the obvious choice for this song, I think another song that's very, very popular in the One Piece world could be the Song of Awakening, that is representative of what the Ancient Kingdom left behind, what this world of dreams had before the world of nightmares took over. We already know this song, very well in fact. and many characters throughout many generations of the One Piece world know the song as well. I'm talking about Big Sasake. Big Sasake is one of, if not the most iconic song to come out of One Piece because of all the ways it's able to bring people together. And since this is a song we know that pirates have sung for generations and generations, meaning it's more than just the poneglyphs that they were able to leave behind. It was the song that brought them together, that brought together the dreams, the joy, the happiness of all the people who lived in this past world. And it's very fitting that when Roger finally found the One Piece, this song was playing in the background, as well as them singing this song the entire time they traveled across the world. I truly feel like there is a connection here between Big Sasake, the Ancient Kingdom, and the truth of the Void Century. Roger even decided to name the island Laugh Tale, and one of the lines in Big Sasake talks about how the journey will be a funny story, or a laugh tale. And if all this stuff is truly connected to Link's awakening, and that's the inspiration for a lot of the stuff that's happening with the Ancient Kingdom and Emu, how fitting is it that Roger had an egg on his ship that looks really similar to the egg on top of Koholint Island that housed the Windfish? Uranus is a sky whale used by Emu, the embodiment of nightmares, to block out the sun and the hope of the world's future, in order to ensure that the world lives in the blackness and darkness of nightmares and subjugation. However, the dream of living in the sun together will be something that lasts in the hearts of everyone in the One Piece world, but we just need one hero to try and figure out the truth of what happened in the past. This is why I think Link's awakening will lead to the truth of the Ancient Kingdom being revealed, so Link's awakening will lead to what I consider Bink's awakening and the dawn of the One Piece world. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. ELBAF is the second Water 7. What exactly do I mean by that? I don't know, watch the video. But first, let's talk about what just happened last chapter in 1066. Vegapunk being shown, Saul being alive, but honestly, not everyone's happy about this. I can understand it, I don't agree at all, but I can at least understand it. Look, even as One Piece fans, we have to acknowledge that there are some general flaws in the way Oda tells the story, and the biggest, most glaring flaw of all is the way he deals with characters dying. Oda always brings back characters who do these amazing sacrifices just because he doesn't want them to die. However, in the newest chapter, we just found out that Saul, who is sacrificing himself to save Robin all the way back in her flashback, is now currently alive in the story, with a high likelihood of him being the man marked by flames that Kid is after on ELBAF. Lots of people really don't like this at all, actually. They think it's more of a Pell, Pound, even Bon Clay type scenario where this actually diminishes the value of Robin's flashback, when personally, I completely disagree. Saul's return actually is going to push the narrative forward, unlike the previously mentioned Pell and Pound. It's not like Pound, who came back out of nowhere after sacrificing himself, or Pell, who came back after blowing himself up like it was just nothing. But we're not talking about the ramifications of characters dying in the story just yet. Oh look, Pell! Speaking of blowing up, I decided to make a sub goal, 10,000 subs and I get a One Piece tattoo. If you're interested, subscribe, let's get into this. So now that we've got the gist that Saul is going to be incredibly important to ELBAF, that means that Robin is also going to be incredibly important to ELBAF. Robin, being the focal point of the Water 7 saga, clearly is important in that arc as well. But when we think about the other characters who are important in the Water 7 arc, there's only one that comes to mind right after Robin. Usopp. Usopp is the ELBAF character. Usopp has been wanting to go to ELBAF ever since Little Garden. Think about how insanely long of a time it's been since Little Garden, and seeing that this is Usopp's moment to finally prove himself as a brave warrior of the sea, clearly he's going to be an important character. And it's a really cool parallel from his time in Water 7. In Water 7, Usopp was at his lowest, not thinking that he actually belonged with the Straw Hats anymore and feeling dispensable. However, he proved his bravery by not only standing up to Luffy and having his voice be heard, but further acting on this bravery and saving Robin along with the crew in disguise as the Sniper King himself. Oh wait, that wasn't Usopp? Okay, never mind. Forget that second part. And ever since Water 7, we've seen Usopp do things we never could have imagined him doing, and ELBAF will be the culmination of all the things he's done in the story, just like how ELBAF is the culmination of all these arcs coming together. Little Garden, then Water 7, then Dressrosa. It's not a coincidence that every arc Usopp is involved in, Giants are involved in as well, and seeing it all culminate at this final section of the story, right before the final war between Luffy, Blackbeard, and the world government actually begins, would be a perfect send-off to the entire story we've had so far. Many people think that Usopp is also going to fight Loki, the current leader of ELBAF presumably, and I think that would be really awesome since Loki is the trickster god of Norse mythology and Usopp's entire combat system is focused on tricking his opponents. Now, I've already talked about why Robin and Usopp are both going to be super important to the ELBAF arc, but there are a lot of other characters that are important to this arc which aren't even our main cast. It seems like Oda has planted seeds for many characters to have their arcs finalized in ELBAF right before the final war, so I want to talk a bit about them real quick. Now, like I said earlier, a lot of people aren't happy about Saul coming back in the story at all. They think it's kind of contrived, it ruins the legacy of Robin's flashback, but like I said earlier, I completely disagree, and now I want to talk about the symbolism behind Saul's flashback and how this is going to play an essential role in what's happening on Laugh Tale after this arc. First, let's talk about laughs and the symbolism of laughter in the story. So many characters of One Piece have these absolutely insane laughs, and I feel as though this was super integral before the reveal that Raftel is actually called Laugh Tale. Robin's flashback is a huge, amazing scene where Saul teaches Robin how to laugh. I love that scene. It hurts every time I watch it. And seeing that we're really close to the now named Laugh Tale, I'm certain we're going to learn the true importance of laughter in the One Piece world, hopefully leading to something possibly related to the Void Century due to all the stuff that Saul knows about from Ohara. It would be really cool to see this character who taught one of our main leads about laughter and the importance of it to teach us about how laughter was important in the Void Century. Many people believe that the tree that's on ELBAF is very much a reference to Yggdrasil, the god tree in Norse mythology, and since this entire tree is seemingly the base of Ohara's entire database of knowledge, it's very likely that the god tree is where we're going to learn about the sun god. Now, who do I think is going to be the antagonist of ELBAF? Do I think it's just going to be Loki and the Giants? No, because the Giants are already aligned with Luffy and Usopp very tightly. See, I think we're past having one major antagonist in a One Piece arc at this point. We just got Big Mom and Kaido in the last arc, and seeing that this is the prelude to the end of the entire series, I think we're going to have many antagonists in just this one arc. The Marines, led by now Fleet Admiral Akainu, yes, Akainu does something, and Blackbeard, a pirate who's been known to be very fascinated by the history of the world, and is also determined to get to the One Piece as much as Luffy. Akainu might feel even ashamed of himself that he wasn't able to stop this information from getting out all these years ago, and feel like it's his duty to finish what he started. And this could finally be the moment that Blackbeard shows his third devil fruit, the Cerberus fruit. Now, I believe this for two reasons. One, it parallels Akainu's own Hellhound ability, and two, it is a reference to Fenrir, who is very important to Ragnarok. And with the world government and Blackbeard and the Straw Hats all fighting at the exact same place, there's no doubt in my mind that things could get even crazier. Could Shanks be involved in the arc? He's known as the Big Boss. He rides on a Viking-looking ship. It's highly likely that Shanks is going to be involved in this arc, and this could possibly be where Shanks and Blackbeard finally face off with one another. Big Mom is very likely to show up once again in this arc as well. I think that it's essential to have a character like Big Mom in an absolute hellscape like Ragnarok, especially so since she has named some of her homies after gods themselves. This thematic connection to gods is in her character, and she has an inherent connection to ELBAF from her flashback. And that's not even the end of it. Like I said, Kid is going to be in this arc as well, which could also lead to a Kid and Shanks conflict, as well as a Shanks-Blackbeard conflict. And because ELBAF is the home of Hyrudine, one of the members of the Straw Hat Grand Fleet, that could lead to even more conflicts since Shanks is currently after Bartolomeo. There are so many options that can happen with ELBAF, leading to this absolutely chaotic frenzy, creating a battle that truly lives up to the name Ragnarok. So when I describe all this endgame war stuff with all these characters coming together, how is this not Enies Lobby? Well, there's one simple reason. Water 7 is setup. ELBAF is setup to discover the truths of the world. In Water 7, we discover a lot. We discover that Robin has been captured. We discover CP9. But in Enies Lobby, that's when we discover the world government is actually a horrible evil that's been plaguing the world for generations. Now, ELBAF, we're going to see a lot of crazy stuff. But right after, when we find the One Piece and discover the truths of the world, that is when we will realize the major bombshells that Oda's been laying for us for years and years, and finally get a lot of great conclusions coming really soon. I don't really know what just happened with the audio right there, but it sounded like Imu's weird, like, spaceship thing was about to come and kill me. Like, the vibration was crazy. However, there are some conclusions that I think we're absolutely going to get in this arc. For example, how exactly are the giants giant? Is the ELBAF tree being so massive connecting us to space and possibly leading us to what the Lunarians actually are, or the possibility of space travel since Enel wanted to go to the moon? Talking about Enel, is Enel going to return to the story finally since he used his ability El Thor, and Thor obviously is a Norse god. Returning in ELBAF would make a lot of sense, and seeing that, it would cause even more chaos since he is someone who thinks he is a god, descending onto a world with the god tree and the celestial dragons who think they are gods. And that's without even mentioning that Luffy himself is the sun god now, meaning that this is just a battleground of the gods. And the craziest part is, this is just the setup, and it's seeming like this is already the most crazy battleground that Oda's ever had. Now, there are some questions I think we're going to get answers to pretty soon, or in this arc right now in Vegapunk's lab, but some other things about them could be revealed in ELBAF. For example, I think we might learn what devil fruits are, but is it possible that the devil fruits originated from the tree on ELBAF? The tree is so immense, I can't imagine it not producing anything ever. Perhaps the tree has some magical quality, or maybe the geology of ELBAF itself is unique in some way, just like how Onigashima was unique as well. Speaking of Onigashima, that island had a massive ancient giant skull on it. Possibly that could lead to us getting some information on that island in relation to ELBAF, what it was originally named, and possibly some info on the ancient giants in relation to ELBAF. Or it could possibly be that the fruits were grown at such a high climate that they started to develop some strange abilities because of the way that they were grown. Or perhaps the same growth of the tree is what caused devil fruits to stop coming into existence as a whole. The tree grew too tall and wasn't able to grow anything in that atmosphere. If you want to see a video that's kind of similar to this idea, check out the Hidden Islands Green Line Theory. He talks about this a lot, and it's a lot more in depth than this right now. This is just something I hope happens in ELBAF, but the primary reason I wanted to make this video is to get one idea across in particular: the importance of Luffy's character growth, both in Water 7 and in ELBAF. We've seen so many characters in One Piece talk about how much better they are than others, like the Celestial Dragons and everyone else in Marie's Joie. Some even try to preach the word of heaven, like Mother Carmel, but are actually truly despicable people. However, the only character that I've ever seen in One Piece talk about hell in a positive light is our main character, Monkey D. Luffy. So this had me thinking, is there any interesting connections I can make between Luffy and anything in the underworld in Norse mythology? And you won't believe what I found. In Norse mythology, there's a very important figure in the underworld simply named Hel. And the most defining feature of Hel is the way that she is sort of in a constant struggle between two wills inside of herself. And I think this is integral to Luffy's character. Something subtle that's been brewing throughout all of this Vegapunk arc so far is that Luffy has been getting a lot more animated with his reactions, and this is something noticeable with most Zoan Devil Fruit users. The more they act like the animal inside of them, the less control they have over themselves as a whole, meaning that Luffy is slowly turning into Sun God Nika and less of Monkey D. Luffy. Sometimes I think we really take for granted how much we know about the cast that the rest of them don't. So this has me thinking, if Luffy finds out that he is a Zoan and a reincarnation of the Sun God Nika, how is he going to feel about it, and what is he going to do to ensure that he's able to stay Monkey D. Luffy first and foremost? Throughout the Water 7 saga, Luffy's struggle was realizing he has to be mature and act like a real captain, while in the ELBAF and rest of the final saga, he's going to have to realize he has to be the more strong-willed person within himself. It's kind of interesting. Both these ideas are very much about will and the way you present yourself, but one is more external and one is very internalized. Something else I wanted to bring up once again is the actual design of Hel. Since I think the Marines and Blackbeard are both going to be integral to this arc, I think it's very fitting that Luffy is a character that is literally split right down the middle design-wise. Luffy is a pirate, the embodiment of evil in this world, but he's also a good person, a beacon of hope in this world. So him having these elements of light and dark in his design, possibly even happening with Gear 5th taking over half of his body, would be really cool in my opinion, and it's a good way to show how much of a middle ground he is between the Marines and pirates like Blackbeard. Awakened Zoans were first ever seen in One Piece in the Impel Down arc, which is an arc that is thematically incredibly tied to Hell and Dante's Inferno. So I thought that was a really cool connective tissue to see that Luffy saying, he feels comfortable in hell is foreshadowing that he is an awakened Zoan the entire time. Pretty cool in my opinion. So with all the connections I've made between ELBAF's plot development and Water 7's plot development, I hope you can understand why I think this will be the second Water 7. We got a lot of mystery, a lot of plot reveals, a lot of lore reveals, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. Pun entirely intended, I am not sorry. Hopefully you can understand what I'm getting at with all this stuff, and especially I'm curious what you think about my idea of Luffy having this internal struggle with himself, and that being the surrogate idea of him being a captain in ELBAF. It's kind of crazy the amount of drama a few beads of sweat can cause throughout the entire One Piece community. And yes, I know that this is only important because it's Zoro versus Mihawk, but the amount of people who are getting super heated about these beads of sweat, and the amount of people now starting to power scale other characters due to their beads of sweat is a bit ridiculous. If people are going to seriously say that Odin is stronger than Prime Whitebeard just because of these beads of sweat in Wano, I better see the same amount of expertise and critique when I see the Takoyaki being considered stronger than Jinbei, Mihawk, and this random octopus. Now obviously I'm making the situation seem like a joke, but some people are genuinely power scaling off of sweat over anything else. Sweat is now considered a feat in One Piece, and that's just crazy. But first and foremost, I'm not a power scaler. I'm the guy who said Lucci is above Kizaru, Fujitora, and Green Bull, if you want to know how valid I am on power scaling, which is not at all.
Why is Fujitora over Kizaru?
I just think he's cooler. That's really it. That's actually it.
Okay, I'll accept that. I'll accept that honest.
What I care about the most in One Piece is the emotional narrative, the character growth, and the plot and mystery of what the One Piece is, and how Luffy is somehow going to defeat the world government. And obviously, if everything were fully static, Luffy would probably never even beat Crocodile. But the emotional narrative that allows him to win these fights makes it a lot more compelling, and we've seen this over and over and over again. So to me, power scaling doesn't really matter because I know Luffy will win eventually. But the One Piece world is a lot more than just Luffy on his adventure. There are tons of other characters and tons of other factions that make this world feel so real and fleshed out and interesting. Oda has masterfully created not just one, but many organizations in the One Piece world that have their own tier of strength and prestige, and it's incredibly compelling to see how Luffy is able to keep rising up to the task every single time. Whether it be a warlord, a member of Cypher Pole, a warlord under a Yonko commander, or a Yonko itself, maybe even two admirals at this point if Green Bull is actually heading to Egghead. Luffy has continued to rise up to the task every single time. But no, RoboCop Kuma here is stronger than Luffy because Luffy's sweating. But this video isn't about Luffy. This video is about Zoro versus Mihawk, one of the most amped up fights in the entire series, and why I think this little bead of sweat caused so much controversy throughout the fandom, and why I think this is a crazy moment for Zoro altogether. Now before I get into the real substance of this video, I just want to say if any of this Zoro talk about Mihawk not being human or being less human than other people does actually allude to the fact that he is a sword or some kind of sword given a devil fruit, huge shout outs to Parvision for making one of the wildest theories I've ever heard, and with this chapter talking about this type of stuff possibly even being confirmed. So if you want to check out that video, make sure to check it out right up there in that corner. I almost pointed at the wrong corner like I always do, but yeah, let's get right into it. It's not a stretch to say that Zoro vs Mihawk is one of the most anticipated fights in the entirety of One Piece. This fight has literally been built up for over 1,000 chapters. I'd personally say this is on the same level as Luffy reuniting with Shanks, and I'm not even a Zoro fanboy like that. But again, this isn't a video about Luffy, it's a video about Zoro vs Mihawk. I know a lot of people hate to say it, but ever since Wano, Zoro is literally built different. He's genuinely started to do stuff that I only assumed Luffy would be capable of doing since he's the main character. But Zoro's just coming up and blocking an attack from two Yonko at once. And sure, he did break every single bone in his body, but you know what? He still did it. And I'm just in disbelief this even happened and I actually saw it with my own eyes. And this goes to show the come up Zoro has had since the beginning of the series. Zoro has his most anticipated rival, albeit a younger version of them, sweating. And this goes to show not only how far Zoro has come, but how far the story has come. We are really in the final saga, and Oda has been confirming it over and over again. But you know me, like I said, I'm not a power scaler, But with this opportunity that I'm talking about with Mihawk, I think it would be a great time to give my thoughts on the Mihawk is a sword theory, and possibly add some new insight with some of the stuff we got in chapter 1073. But before we talk about the possibility of swords becoming humans, we need to talk about the possibilities of there being vampires in One Piece. Yes, I can't believe that's a real sentence I just said. God, I love One Piece. Now, with the reveal of Stussy being a seeming vampire race in the world of One Piece, it gets me thinking about a lot of stuff, like the fact that there are actually other characters we've seen in the story with bat wings up to this point, even on Roger's crew. But if there's a bat race in the One Piece world, where do they come from and where do they go? And where do they come from Cotton Eye Joe? Mihawk has always had a very gothic aesthetic with his all black and red outfit and his super dreary Nightmare Before Christmas island. This man literally lives on an island basically all to himself, completely uninhabited and destroyed. And personally, I couldn't see a better place in the entirety of One Piece for the Bat People to originate, because this place used to be an inhabited island before it was seemingly destroyed by some force we don't know about yet. It's very likely that this race of Bat People were subjugated just like the fishmen because they both shared the ability to travel all over the world with ease. However, Oda was hiding them in plain sight like he's done time and time again, like with the Minks, the Dwarves, and the Three-Eyed Tribe with Pudding. Although we've seen objects that were given animal Zoan fruits, we've never seen an object that was given a human model Zoan fruit. And I genuinely think this is going to be something really interesting if this does happen to be the case. My personal belief is that Mihawk has the human model vampire devil fruit. It's crazy to think that the model vampire devil fruit has been such a crackpot theory for such a long time. But now, with this possibly being confirmed as a race in the One Piece world, it's becoming a lot more likely and less seemingly a mythical Zoan. Because a human isn't a mythical Zoan, there are humans that are mythical, but a vampire just being a race in the One Piece world makes it seem a lot more believable. And to make it even more compelling in my opinion, his name isn't just Dracula, something super obviously vampiric. His name is Dracul, something that only alludes to the idea of a vampire while having something more possibly behind it. And the guy rides all over the ocean on a literal coffin. The symbolism is right in our face. Although it's entirely possible that Bakken could be a vampire person, I think that might be more of a gag on Oda's part, calling her an old bat. But I think Stussy having wings, that makes me think that she was not just a clone of Bakken, but also something that was more of a hybrid, sort of like the Seraphim. Now that we're on the idea of experimentation in the One Piece world, let's get into what I think happened when Mihawk was made in the first place, and how this relates to other things that have been made by the world government. We just recently discovered that Mihawk was even referred to as the Marine Hunter, but this has me thinking, why was he hunting Marines in the first place? And does it have something to do with him being some sort of experiment by the world government? The only other sword we've seen that's been given a Zoan fruit has been Funkfried, a sword that was solely working for the world government to subjugate pirates. Perhaps Mihawk is meant to be the antithesis of Funkfried, with him being a man in all black and Funkfried being a white elephant. Yes, I am comparing Mihawk to Funkfried. Welcome to One Piece in 2023. Now the main thing I want to discuss right now is the will of Zoan devil fruits. A super hot topic to be sure, but it's something I think that's essential. Now, I'm not going to say elephants aren't smart. Elephants don't forget, that's even a whole idiom. But the human mind simply has more capabilities than an elephant's mind does. I think Mihawk getting a human model fruit allowed him to be more independent and not just be a tool to the world government like Funkfried, and that allowed him to rebel against the Marines, hence them trying to get after him over and over again, and that led to him becoming the Marine Hunter. There's even the possibility that Mihawk is similar to a cursed blade with a will of its own, just like Enma or the Sandai Kitetsu. They have to choose the person that's willing to fight them and wield them, which makes it especially fascinating that since chapter 51, Mihawk knew that Zoro was worthy of fighting him. But now, let's get even deeper with this. There's even more connections to Funkfried and Mihawk that I didn't even start to talk about yet. Funkfried is a sword himself, but also has 2 tusks attached to the front of him, therefore making 3 swords. And Mihawk is the same. Let's say Mihawk is a sword, he would also be accompanied by Yoru, his massive cross-shaped blade, and Kogatana, which is the small little dagger that he used against Zoro back in Baratie. Both of these characters would, in essence, be 3 swords, fitting to fight against Zoro. That might actually be the reason that Mihawk was sweating against Zoro in Baratie. After Zoro literally had an attack called Three Sword Secret, Mihawk might have been found out and realized that he was in fact the Three Sword Secret. And how fitting is it that the world's greatest swordsman has to defeat a literal sword man? And yup, we're all tying it back to sweat here, guys. You know, we love the full circle type videos, you know what I'm saying? One Piece is a story of will and ambition, and Zoro is clearly one of the most ambitious characters in the entire series. So having him go up against a character that is a sword with a will of its own, with the will of a Zoan Devil Fruit, with the strongest ambition in the world since he's the world's strongest swordsman, would be a pretty harrowing task, and I think it's definitely one worth the hype of over 1,000 chapters. I didn't expect this to turn into a Mihawk video talking about funk, freedom, vampires, but here we are, and if you liked it, thanks for watching. I feel like the One Piece fan base at the moment has had one question primarily at the top of their minds when it comes to the Wano arc, and that is who will join Luffy's crew either during the arc or by the end of the arc. Now luckily, the legend Jinbei has confirmed joining the crew now that he has returned to Wano after saving the Straw Hats from Big Mom's raid on Whole Cake Island. However, I believe that we will get at least one new crew member by the end of the Wano arc. When originally writing the script for this video, I wanted to analyze 4 specific people that I felt had the most potential for becoming a crew member in Wano. But after realizing the direction that Oda has given her in comparison to the other characters that I believe can be contenders for a Straw Hat crew member, I feel as though her potential for becoming the next Straw Hat is drastically lower than the rest. Because of this, I wanted to change the script into something else. Instead of focusing on why these 4 characters could potentially be Straw Hat crew members, I want to focus on why these other 3 characters have more potential for becoming a crew member than this character. Now that I have all the pretense out of the way, I just want to start this video right away, and just letting you know that I'm not against this character. I actually find her really enjoyable, but I just want to get my thoughts across on why I think she will remain an ally and not turn into a crew member. At the start of Luffy's journey, Oda sets up the premise that Luffy wants at least 10 members to join his crew. While this idea of specifically the 10 members has changed in Oda's mind with the addition of Jinbei joining the crew, which has been revealed as an afterthought of his importance in Luffy's story, this number has stayed relatively consistent. I wanted to highlight 3 specific reasons as to why I believe Carrot will not be chosen as this final supposed member of the Straw Hat crew, and instead she will be passed up for another, more important person, I would say, in Luffy's story. The most prominent reason why I believe Carrot will not be joining the crew is because Carrot does not have a strong connection to Luffy that is shown throughout the series so far. While she may have that developing moment, Carrot has been in the series for almost 200 chapters, and she has yet to have that uniting moment with Luffy. Each of the contenders that I have that I would say are chosen over Carrot have had insanely strong connections to Luffy throughout their entire runtime in the story. Before I go on and on and on about who exactly these contenders are, I thought I might as well get this out of the way right now. The 3 people that I believe would be chosen over Carrot to join the crew are Smoker, Vivi, and Yamato. The reason I say those people now is because I was going to mention it's kind of sad that Yamato and Luffy have had that defining moment that binds them together, and Yamato has only been in the series for about 40 chapters right now. Obviously, Smoker and Luffy have had a really strong connection ever since the beginnings of the series in Logue Town, and Smoker has stayed a consistent person in Luffy's life with Alabasta and Punk Hazard. Vivi essentially had a whole saga where Luffy and her teamed up to defeat Crocodile and ensure that the land of Alabasta was safe. And Yamato really admires Luffy, not only because Luffy is Ace's younger brother, but also because Yamato believes that Luffy is the man that Oden has been waiting for these 20 years to defeat Kaido. All in all, I'd say that these three characters have had more emotional bonding moments with Luffy that have made a stronger impact on the reader. The only impact that Carrot specifically has made on Luffy that no one else could is the fact that she would bite at his cheek and his ear, and it would be a fun gag. If anything, I would say that Carrot's true emotional moment was with Sanji, when Carrot tells Sanji that Pedro has died in order to save the crew. The next idea that I had for why Carrot would be passed up is her role on the ship itself. For Yamato, I'd say this is pretty self-evident, since they would be able to be a nice addition for just the fights in general. It's rare in One Piece to see someone with a female body build actually do strong damage, and Yamato would be especially dynamic because of this. However, Yamato could fulfill a double role within the ship, not just as a brawler, but also as the log keeper, similar to how Oden was for Roger and Whitebeard. Yamato could be the one that writes the story of Monkey D. Luffy's travels to Laugh Tale, and then Brook could recite that at the end of the story. Now for Smoker, this is kind of theorizing into the final war section of the story, but I believe that he would be a really good strategist for the crew. Since Smoker would be deferring from the Marines to join Luffy, he would have the same role that X Drake did in the pre-time skip, where we have this person who's incredibly knowledgeable about the Marines and all the facets of them that could give Luffy the intel on how to defeat them. Smoker was also a vice admiral, meaning he led thousands and thousands of Marine soldiers and has the ability to command thousands of troops. I think this would be useful for Smoker trying to lead the Grand Fleet to do whatever Luffy wants them to do in the battle. And I think the strongest nail in the coffin for this point is Vivi's role on the ship. When we are first shown Vivi after not seeing her for a very long time when she is heading to the Reverie, she is at the lookout of the ship. This is shown after we have followed Carrot, who has also been the lookout of the ship throughout the entirety of Whole Cake Island. So this kind of feels like a stab in the gut for a lot of people who want Carrot to join the crew. As I previously mentioned, Vivi has that importance to Luffy, but also to the reader itself, because Vivi is the sign of friendship that will never go away, one of the strongest themes throughout the entirety of One Piece itself. Another role that Vivi already played in Luffy's journey is the fact that she taught him how to be a really strong leader. A good example of this is in Drum Island, where Luffy has to bow for the first time in order to get help for Nami. Once again, I believe that these three characters definitely outshine Carrot in importance for this reason as well. Carrot's role literally being filled by Vivi in just the Reverie made me believe that she would definitely not join. And the last point I would like to bring up is their urgency in the story of One Piece itself. I'll start with Vivi because I feel like she has the most importance in One Piece at the moment. At the end of the Reverie, we saw Eam with 4 pictures: Luffy, Blackbeard, Shirahoshi, and the one that Eam was holding, Vivi. This puts Vivi at a really insane risk that the world government has this immense interest in just her. I could ramble on and on about why I think Vivi is important in the future, but at this point, none of us know. I can only assume that Wapol told the world government that Vivi was with the Straw Hats when she was with Luffy on Drum Island. But I don't want to go too far into theorizing for this point right now. I just want to say what is definitive information as to why I believe these characters would be chosen over Carrot. And now for Smoker, I believe he would also be a really important character for the story, because he would be the Marine that defies the labels that are given to them. One of the most striking scenes, I would say, in the entirety of One Piece is at the end of Punk Hazard, where the Marines and the pirates are divided by a massive line in the ground. However, this label is completely ignored by Luffy and the G5 Marines. The only people that uphold this label are Law and Smoker. At the end of this arc, Kuzan himself comes to Punk Hazard and tells Smoker that he is almost happy to not be a Marine, because there are things he couldn't do as a Marine that he can do now. I believe that Smoker's joining of the Straw Hat crew would be the nail in the coffin for the theme that the Marines aren't always good or bad, and that pirates aren't always good or bad. I think that this would be the perfect blur of these things just being labels and that they could work together because they see each other as respectable people. And the final character, Yamato, I believe that their role in the story is just getting started because they've just been introduced, but I think that their importance with Ace and their importance with Odin's log notebook will definitely be foretold more in the future. Yamato also being Kaido's son means that Yamato has a lot of urgency currently going on in the raid on Onigashima. Yamato also seems to carry on the inherited will of Kozuki Odin, since Yamato himself refers to himself as Odin. Yamato's dream in life is to leave Wano and see the rest of the world. However, Kaido has limited Yamato to just Onigashima. Luffy's arrival to meet Yamato does two purposes. One, it allows Yamato to be free and possibly see the rest of the world in the future, but it also allows Yamato to finally fulfill Odin's will. For Carrot, I was really excited on the raid on Onigashima because it seemed like she was going to get a fight with Perospero. However, Oda just completely passed through that because Perospero wiped the floor with her. And in chapter 10-12, it seems that Nekomamushi is heading towards Perospero, so Carrot might not even get that revenge battle that I think she deserves. It's kind of sad. Carrot had such a high regard in Whole Cake Island because she was focused on to a pretty extensive degree. She wasn't the main character, obviously, since it was the year of Sanji, but she was focused on pretty extensively for a new character. However, as Wano has rolled in and has kept going and going and going, her urgency in the story has kept falling and falling. I do not think Carrot is going to join. I think she'll remain an ally similar to Inuarashi, Nekomamushi, well, if they live. I assume that all the scabbards are going to die, so I just say the minks themselves. Possibly, Carrot could become a new Duke in case Inuarashi and Nekomamushi do die. I believe she will keep that strong role as an ally to Luffy, but I don't think she has the urgency or the thematic importance or the connection to Luffy that I think most of the Straw Hat crew members do possess. Now, I wouldn't be disappointed at all if Carrot actually does become a member of the crew. However, I think her role as an ally and kind of a liaison to the minks themselves is what she will end up being in the long run. Maybe she's even meant to represent the new bond forming between the residents of Wano and the residents of Zou, and maybe we'll learn about their past through her connection with Momonosuke since she's on Wano. That'll be all my thoughts on that. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and I'm curious what you think about Carrot's role in the story because, well, you already got my opinion on it, but I'm curious what you all think. Let me know down below, and with that, that's been me. Have a good one. Egghead Island has always been one of my favorite places in the One Piece world to talk about, not only because we are just on this island right now, but because of all the potential that I see within the aesthetic of the island and what Oda can draw inspiration from, whether it's from some of our own cultures in the real world or something he just admires in the real world, like video games, books, music, etc. And personally, I think that Egghead is so rife with creativity and imagination that there's so many things that you could pull from. I wanted to do another video talking about what I think is inspiration for Egghead Island. And I know you might be thinking, you already did this super long video about Egghead, and yeah, I did do a super long video about Egghead, but guess what? It's another one now, because there's more than just one inspiration for everything in One Piece, because that's just how Oda writes his stuff. So allow me to take you down another Egghead rabbit hole that none of you probably would have ever expected, because I actually aired this theory out to a bunch of people before actually starting the scripting of this, and nobody had any idea what the inspiration of this was, which is honestly super great, because this show has actually canonically and confirmed been an inspiration for One Piece. Let's start and go all the way back to an arc that makes perfect sense with Egghead, Punk Hazard. And yes, talk about Punk Hazard in 2023. We're truly scraping the bottom of the barrel right now. I feel like Punk Hazard was one of those arcs we all experienced but rarely ever go around to re-experience, so since we're in the Egghead arc, I've obviously wanted to reread a bunch of arcs that are what I think to be integral to the Egghead experience. And obviously, with this being Vegapunk's island, this one seemed pretty important. But onto Punk Hazard in specific, we get to see that Smoker and Tashigi and all these other characters come to fruition with their own post-time skip plotline that eventually leads to Vegapunk. And obviously, I know what you might be thinking. So this is a smoker theory then, right? Well, no, the actual important character here is Mocha. Would you believe it? Yep, the little girl is more important than Smoker right now. Who would have thought? After DRESSROSA, we get a really cool scene of Smoker and Tashigi reacting to Luffy and Law defeating Doflamingo, but more importantly to this theory, we see a bunch of the kids talking to them, talking about when they're finally going to meet Dr. Decapants. And obviously that's a super funny gag for Vegapunk, and in English it doesn't translate one-to-one with it meaning big underwear. So in English, instead of Vegapunk, it's Bigapants, which is also super funny obviously and gets the point across, but I'm going to leave a little pin in that Decapants name. But I do want to say one thing in specific, which is the time that this chapter was released. This chapter was first ever released in July of 2015, and a few years later, we're going to continue the specific through line throughout Whole Cake Island with the characters of the Vinsmoke family. Obviously, with Judge and Vegapunk both being a part of Mads, it makes a lot of sense that their technological advancements would sort of mirror each other in a very interesting way. And obviously, we're going to start with Germa since we were introduced to them first. The technology of Germa is super high-tech with a hyperfixation on cloning, as well as the idea of amplifying human genetics by removing emotion to enhance pure physical strength that would be able to conquer anything and then become something that is truly worthy of the quote-unquote Germa name and rise to power once again. Throughout Whole Cake Island, we follow Sanji and learn a bunch of horrible, disgusting stuff about his family, but eventually realize that Sanji truly was the best thing that came out of his family, because he has all the raw strength and genetics that Judge wanted, while also actually being a real, fully fledged human being. And I think this is truly fascinating, because when we look at Vegapunks, they are eccentric, having these amazing little personality quirks to each one. But I want to talk about the inspiration behind Sanji and his siblings, because I thought this was truly really fascinating when I first learned about it. Back when I was younger, there was a show that was really popular, and I specifically remember watching it a lot in high school, called Osomatsu-san, which was a show about 6 sextuplets that all have their own distinct personality traits. And I thought it was incredibly fascinating to learn that Oda's daughter was such a huge fan of the show that Oda decided to make Sanji's family more like the family in the show. I thought that was really crazy, because as someone who was a huge fan of the show and now a huge fan of One Piece, I never really would have put that together. I actually made a video about this pretty much the second I found out about it, because I was so impressed this is actually a real thing that Oda was inspired by, but also because of this whole Punnett Square thing that I'm not going to get into right now. You could click the link right there, you know what's up. What I think was so interesting about this is that Oda specifically had 4 of them when the show obviously has 6 of them. That led me to thinking, why did Oda leave out 6 of them? He could have really easily done it, and Reiju has pink in her design, and one of the sextuplets is pink. You just need a purple one. That always confused me and eluded me for such a long time until we hit Egghead. Judge has always been depicted as someone who's inferior to the greatness that is Dr. Vegapunk, so I think it's perfect that Vegapunk's experiments all are incredibly distinct with very different personalities and visual differences instead of just being siblings. It allows for this connection through the Osomatsu thing that started what Germa was to be fully fulfilled with what Vegapunk was able to make. And it makes perfect sense too. When we got the trailer for One Piece Volume 106, the first volume on Egghead, they really tried to nail in the fact that Egghead is heavily inspired by Showa anime. And wouldn't you know it, Osomatsu is actually a super old product that has been around since the 1960s. Now, you could say all you want about Osomatsu being the primary inspiration for Egghead, but that I personally don't agree with. Egghead is a hodgepodge of all this crazy, insane stuff, and Showa-style anime is definitely one of them. And I personally think that Osomatsu, being a previous inspiration for One Piece through the Germa family, would be a really great through line to have inspiration in why Vegapunk has 6 versions of himself. But in case you still aren't convinced, I have one last point that I brought up earlier that I'm going to bring up now, because I really think that this has a lot of interesting connections to how Oda has set up Vegapunk's character, and how these influences from Osomatsu could have led to this arc being more inspired by it. At the end of Dressrosa, the little kids call Vegapunk Decapants, which is obviously a super funny gag, but what makes it actually kinda crazy is the fact that there is a character named Decapan in Osomatsu, and this is not like some minor character. This is a pretty huge character that consistently shows up all the time in tons of skits. And what makes this even crazier is that in a lot of these skits, he's a doctor. Like, he is Dr. Decapan. Now, do I think that this guy is the inspiration for Vegapunk? Not at all. Like, I know the struggle of thinking I know who Vegapunk's going to be inspired by. You know, you get used to it. He's Albert Einstein. But Egghead, as I said, is very inspired by Showa anime, and with these 6 versions of Vegapunk, and then this Decapants connection that he had in Dressrosa, I definitely think it's possible that Oda took inspiration from Osomatsu for a lot of the stuff in Egghead. You're telling me that One Piece is based off of some, like, weird show about, like, 6 twins? Like, but what does that mean, though? Like, how does Luffy and the plot... Yes, there is more to this than just aesthetics, and let's get into that right now. And while you see me rambling uncontrollably at the screen, how about you subscribe, guys? That would be pretty awesome. Here's the thing. Osomatsu, being an old Showa anime, is not a serialized story. It's a comedy, and a lot of the stuff in it has no plot connection whatsoever. And I personally love that this comedic aspect of old anime is seemingly one of the driving forces of the plot in Egghead Island. In Egghead, Luffy is more in his element here than he has ever been before. Not only is Luffy the strongest he's ever been, he's literally in a place that embodies what he is perfectly. Egghead is a place where anything you can imagine becomes real. And I think that's what makes this section of the story so compelling for me, because Luffy's power is imagination, and him being in a place with imagination as the main theme, I think is perfect, because it goes to show just how strong Luffy is going to be in this arc, and how this is his first ever huge stand in the new world post being a Yonko. And that has me incredibly excited for what's to come. And I know a lot of people might be thinking, oh, but if Luffy gets away too easily, then what's the point? Where's the suspense? Where's the drama? The tragedy? Well, the tragedy of Egghead is already super obvious. We're seeing places all over the world get turned into turmoil or get wiped out entirely, and the main tragic element of Egghead is obviously Bonnie and Kuma. We had this flashback that's been established for such a long time. We're finally going to see it. We're going to see the horrors of the world government on full display. As much as people might think this is not as cool as it could be, this is Luffy's moment. This is his time. And I think it is a perfect setup for the craziness that's to come in the final saga. Like, if Luffy struggles here against Kizaru, then what is he going to do against Blackbeard or Emu? And I know that a lot of people actually want Luffy to fail right now, so he could further parallel Kid and Law, who are currently undergoing some insane stuff with Shanks and Blackbeard, but I personally think that this would just be a huge misstep on Oda's part. Luffy is clearly a step above Kid and Law, like, let's be for real, and him actually failing in this regard would be a serious downplaying of everything Luffy's done in the story up to this point to become someone worthy of actually being called a Yonko by taking down 2 of them through his own determination. And yes, I know Buggy's on there too. He's worthy of it too. You gotta stop coping. Kid and Law were never gonna be Yonkos. Buggy was always number 1. You guys already know this. Like, just accept it at this point. Luffy will be able to enhance the comedic aspect of the arc like he did during his fight with Rob Lucci, evidently dog walking pretty much every opponent he has. Now, does that mean that Luffy's gonna have an easy fight throughout the rest of One Piece? People were really skeptical of that ever since he fought Kaido. Will Luffy ever have a serious fight ever again? I think he definitely will, with characters like Blackbeard and Emu, who clearly have a lot of gravitas in the story. Meanwhile, Kizaru is just saying he's a cog in the machine, and yeah, he is. He's a stepping stone to getting us into the final saga, and he's just the first one off the chopping block. And I couldn't think of a better way to invert Sabaody Archipelago than by having a scene that is so rooted in tragedy be something that's rooted in comedy. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and I know it's been a hot minute since I've made a video, but I was so inspired by this idea of Osamatsu being an inspiration in One Piece that I thought I could possibly enhance it and lead it into some Egghead speculation. Oda absolutely killed it this chapter. We got Awakened Lucci, something I am so ecstatic about you cannot believe. We got some insights onto what devil fruits might actually be, and oh my god, we might have just found out what the Will of D is this chapter, and needless to say, it's a huge one, so let's get right into it. I decided to make a sub goal, 10,000 subs and I get a One Piece tattoo. If you're interested, subscribe, let's get into this. Now this is something I've been waiting for weeks now. This has been a huge agenda on my channel and it's actually happening. So to all the people who thought Lucci was going to get fodderized, you look stupid now. It sounds insane to say, but even with this absolutely fire design, this isn't the thing I'm most excited to talk about, but we will get back to this design in just a few minutes. Now let's get into the real craziness of the chapter, devil fruits being the dreams and desires of people who wanted different lives. Now while this is all hypothetical Vegapunk theorization, I definitely think this is a serious possibility of being true. Vegapunk has been talking about devil fruits for years now, so he clearly has some more insight than anyone else in the world about what these things actually are, maybe besides the Ohara knowledge that's on ELBAF right now. Although we don't know anything about how devil fruits were created, this severely changes the game when it comes to thinking about why they were created. Sure, we don't know if they were from a tree or from some kind of ancient factory in the ancient kingdom, but we do know that devil fruits have some intended purpose, which is to enlighten the life of others, which goes against what the world government in the past might have wanted, which might be the Lunarians trying to suppress people like the humans from being able to attain some powers. I say Lunarians in specific because they were viewed as the gods of the former world, so it's fitting that devil fruits, especially the Nika fruit, is attributed with gods. Vegapunk even ponders if gods are even real in this world, and if devil fruits are even related to gods. It really adds a lot of stuff into question. Was Nika a god in the first place, or was he just a normal strong person? A lot to think about. But we do know one thing for sure, and that's when Zoans and humans collide with one another, if their wills aren't overpowered by the Zoans, they will have a true awakening. I personally believe that Zoan awakenings happen when the dreams of the animal that the Zoan is attributed to and the user coincide with one another. Luffy was able to awaken because he wants to be the freest man in the world, very similar to how Nika has the ability to be the freest thing in the entire universe from what we know. Lucci only wants to kill people, and that's his entire goal in life, to get his bloodlust out and basically just be a murderer. Having a predatory Zoan animal makes a lot of sense since their goals would coincide. He was able to awaken. And you could even say this with Yamato. Their devil fruit had a ring similar to Luffy and Lucci's, so it's highly possible that they were awakened, and it makes a lot of sense since Yamato was trying to be the protector of Wano versus Kaido, and Yamato's fruit is the protector deity of Wano. Since I'm bringing up Kaido, I want to talk about why I think he didn't awaken. In many Eastern mythologies, the dragons that Kaido is modeled after is actually a peaceful deity, but Kaido's real goal is to start the greatest war in the world and find JoyBoy. Now, because of this disparity between Kaido's goals and the fruit's goals, I think he wasn't able to awaken. And I know many people might say that his drunken form was a form of awakening, but I personally don't think so. Now I can already hear people saying that Kaido should have awakened because he's one of the Yonko, one of the 4 strongest people in the entire world. It's ridiculous that he didn't awaken. Now the idea of a curse and a user in an anime having to work together is not at all original to One Piece, so I can definitely see this being the case for Kaido, and for this being a detriment to Kaido. I think it would be very interesting for Kaido, one of the most war-hungry villains in the entire series, to be stuck with a fruit that's a very peace-loving individual. I think it's very interesting, to be honest, and a good duality, because Kaido doesn't actually want war for the sake of war. He wants war for the sake of peace. However, it's very possible that Kaido could have awakened and become one of these monster things like an Impel Down because his will didn't align with the fruit's will. And personally, I'm really interested to see if that happens. Maybe even in ELBAF, when Big Mom returns to the story, she's using Kaido as a dragon, which was a huge fan theory that was happening when they both teamed up on Wano. Not only is this great for Kaido to be written out of the story, but it's a really tragic way for him to go, because his entire method of thinking was having a great death, but now he won't even be able to experience his own death because he doesn't even know anything that's going on because he's being possessed by his awakened devil fruit form. This also brings into question the possibility of other characters that have awakened, Doflamingo, Law, Kid, Katakuri, but I'm not really sure how I feel about that just yet. But with all of that out of the way, now that we know that devil fruits and dreams are inherently tied together, there's one last thing I need to bring up. I think in this chapter we might have just discovered what the will of D is, and with that I mean the will of D isn't just the will of Dawn, it's not the will of devil fruits, it's not the will of a smile, I think it's the will of the dreamers. But let me give you the full reasoning as to why. I think this is really heading to the will of D being confirmed as the will of dreamers. Dreams create fruits, and even Roger said, as long as people seek freedom, dreams will continue to exist. Nah, you are spitting. So Teach is the only D to not smile in the face of death, because he's the only one who cannot sleep and dream. Okay, this might sound really morbid, right? Technically, death is like an eternal dream. Tune Forest is a representation of what you could do in a dream. Total freedom, the warrior of dreams. Did we solve the will of D, guys? Did we solve the will of D live? Because the people can dream of the dawn. The dreamers are the people who made the devil fruits. That's why I really like the idea of the will of D being like two sides. You know, because there's Rox's dream, which is inherited by Blackbeard. There's Roger's dream, which is inherited by Luffy. The dreamers, the dreams making the devil fruits, the wills of not just Zoans, but all devil fruits, could be from the dreamers who made the fruits come to existence. Now I know it might seem like there's a lot backing this already, but I'm actually going to give you even more information as to why I think the will of D is the will of dreamers. If devil fruits were made by people who wanted to have their dreams achieved and be something different, and they were the ones who went against the world itself, how fitting would it be for all these characters with the will of D to be going against the world itself? Rox D Zebek wants to take over the world. Monkey D Luffy wants to be the pirate king, the freest man in the world. Gold D Roger wants to find the history and truths of the world. Marshall D Teach wants to make the world his own. Now what makes this really fascinating to me is the fact that Blackbeard has one of the most iconic lines in One Piece behind him. Did Blackbeard only want the dark fruit because it had the ability to take away other devil fruit powers, in essence, other devil fruit dreams, and give them to himself, sort of as a way of experiencing dreams for himself, but not actually experiencing what a real dream is. And this would explain the differences between Luffy and Blackbeard. Luffy can dream while Blackbeard can't. And what makes this so perfect in my opinion is the fact that we knew that people like Blackbeard who lived on Winter Islands aren't able to dream before Blackbeard was ever fully introduced into the story on Jaya. We learned this in Drum Island, which I think is going to be integral not just to the story in the future later on, but to the story as a whole, with Drum Island being important since Luffy is the drums of liberation. Perhaps there's more to look at in that arc in particular than other ones going forward. Jaguar D Saul has some serious potential coming up, and I think when we meet Saul, he's going to be telling us, the readers, about what the will of D actually is. And I personally wouldn't be shocked if it is actually the will of the dreamers. Hidden in the middle of the hype that is the awakening fight with Luffy and Lucci, we've gotten some serious insights into what the world of One Piece could have for us to hold, and solving one of the biggest mysteries in the entire series. I think that Egghead might actually be the start of this grand final war that's happening right now. We got a Yonko crew, Cypher Pole Zero, an admiral, and a Revolutionary Army head coming right to this island right now, and all the forces seem to be fighting against each other. The hype for me is so real, and seeing that Egghead could be the start of the end, it has me so insanely excited, like you have no idea. But more than anything in this video, I want to give a huge shout out to Brandon King. He was in my chat during the chapter stream and he brought up the idea of the Will of Dreamers, which caused this huge rabbit hole. So huge thanks to Brandon King for getting this idea rolling and really making me convinced that this could possibly be what the Will of D is. I'm so curious, what was your favorite moment of the chapter? We had Lucci awakening versus Gear 5th, super hype. We got Devil Fruit reveals, just so much greatness. So I'd love to know what you think about this chapter. Personally, one of my favorites of the entire year. We got one chapter left this year and it's going to be a holiday chapter for everyone, so can't wait to talk once more about the One Piece greatness during the holiday season. And with that, hope you enjoyed the video and have a good one.